The gates of Grand Elysium Academy loomed before Ethan like the maw of some ancient beast, all polished obsidian and shimmering with embedded mana crystals that pulsed with a soft, blue light. He stood at the base of the sweeping marble staircase, his knuckles white around the strap of his worn leather satchel. Around him, students flowed in a vibrant current of color and sound. Nobles in tailored uniforms embroidered with family crests, their laughter sharp and confident as they showcased flashes of their system-granted abilities. A boy with fiery red hair conjured a small flame in his palm, earning appreciative nods. A girl with silver eyes made a pebble float in midair, her telekinesis skill drawing a small crowd. Ethan swallowed hard, the lump in his throat feeling like a stone. He adjusted his plain, gray tunic, the standard issue for F-rank students, devoid of any embellishment. The system had assigned him his class 3 days ago on his 16th birthday, and the memory still burned like acid. He'd stood in the town square with the other youths, heart pounding as the glowing interface appeared before him. Most received B or C ranks: warrior, mage, healer, with decent skills like fireball or iron skin. Then it was Ethan's turn. The screen flickered, and the words materialized in stark, unflinching text. Class: Office Clerk, F rank. Skill: copy-paste, passive/active. Description: copy data or simple objects. Limited to non-living matter. Control plus C to copy, Control plus V to paste, asterisk asterisk. A ripple of laughter had spread through the crowd. His parents had tried to smile, but their eyes held a pity that cut deeper than any mockery. Now, at the academy, that pity was gone, replaced by open disdain. Move it, Scrap, a voice sneered from behind. Ethan flinched as a shoulder shoved him aside, sending him stumbling against the cold stone of the gate. He looked up to see a tall boy with sleek black hair and a crimson-lined uniform, the mark of an S rank. The boy didn't even glance back, his focus on the group of nobles around him. Did you see that? An F rank, here. Grand Elysium must be desperate for tuition. Ethan's cheeks flushed with heat. He kept his head down, merging into the stream of students ascending the stairs. The entrance hall was a cavernous space, vaulted ceilings adorned with frescoes depicting legendary heroes battling dragons and demons. At the far end, a massive crystal orb hovered, projecting a shimmering list of names and classes, the academy roster. Ethan's eyes scanned it, finding his own entry near the bottom. Ethan Gray, Office Clerk, F rank. Skill: copy-paste. A few students nearby snickered, pointing. One mimed typing at an invisible keyboard. Ethan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to breathe. It's just a skill, he told himself. Maybe it's useful in some way. But the system's description echoed in his mind. Limited to non-living matter. What good was copying a rock or a piece of paper in a world of magic and monsters? He followed the signs to the freshman orientation hall, a vast auditorium filled with rows of polished wooden benches. The air hummed with chatter and the occasional burst of magic, a spark of lightning, a gust of wind. Ethan found a seat near the back, away from the clusters of nobles. He pulled out a small notebook, his fingers tracing the familiar texture of the cover. It was a habit from home, a way to organize his thoughts. He wrote at the top of a fresh page, asterisk Day 1, Grand Elysium. Objective: survive, asterisk. Before he could write more, the hall fell silent. A woman strode onto the stage, her presence commanding immediate attention. She wore robes of deep violet, embroidered with silver runes that glowed faintly. Her hair was swept back in a severe bun, and her eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made Ethan shrink in his seat. "Welcome, new students," she said, her voice amplified by some unseen magic. "I am Headmistress Althea, and this is Grand Elysium Academy, the premier institution for honing the gifts granted by the system. Here, you will learn to master your classes, develop your skills, and prepare for a world where strength determines your worth." She gestured to the crystal orb, which now displayed a rotating list of class rankings. "You have been sorted by the system's judgment. S and A ranks will receive priority resources, advanced dungeons, private tutors, mana-dense environments. B and C ranks will have standard access. D and F ranks," she paused, her gaze lingering on the back rows. You will have basic facilities and are expected to contribute through manual labor or administrative duties to earn your keep. A murmur ran through the crowd. Ethan felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Manual labor. He thought of his copy-paste skill. Maybe he could duplicate paperwork or something. The idea felt pathetic. After the orientation, they were dismissed to their first class, System Fundamentals, taught by a weary-looking man named Professor Kale. The classroom was smaller, with desks arranged in a semicircle. Ethan took a seat near the door, hoping to go unnoticed. No such luck. As the professor droned on about mana theory, the door swung open, and 3 students sauntered in late. Ethan recognized the tall boy from the gates, the one who'd shoved him. He had 2 companions, a girl with icy blonde hair and a smirk, and a burly boy with arms crossed over his chest. "Ah, Lord Cedric," Professor Kale said, his tone noticeably warmer. "Please, take your seats." Cedric's eyes swept the room, landing on Ethan. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Look, Elara, it's the office clerk. Practicing his filing skills already." The blonde girl, Elara, laughed, a sound like tinkling glass. "Maybe he can copy your homework, Cedric." "Oh wait, his skill only works on non-living matter. Too bad your brain doesn't qualify." The class erupted in laughter. Ethan stared down at his desk, his face burning. He could feel the eyes on him, the weight of their mockery. Don't react, he thought. Just don't give them the satisfaction. Professor Kale cleared his throat. Enough. Cedric, Elara, Marcus, sit down. We're discussing skill synergy today. As the lesson resumed, Ethan tried to focus. The professor explained how high-rank skills could combine for greater effects, like a water mage and lightning mage, creating electrified attacks. Ethan's mind wandered. What could he possibly synergize with? Copy-paste didn't interact with mana. It was a mundane, almost joke of a skill in a world of wonders. During a practical demonstration, Cedric was called to the front. Lord Cedric possesses the S-rank class, Storm Knight, Professor Kale announced. His skill, Tempest Blade, allows him to channel lightning into his weapon. Observe. Cedric drew a slender sword from his hip. With a flourish, crackling arcs of blue-white energy enveloped the blade, hissing and sparking. The air smelled of ozone. He swung at a training dummy, and lightning tore through it, leaving a charred, smoking hole. The class applauded. Cedric bowed, his eyes flicking to Ethan with a look of pure contempt. Now, Professor Kale said, who can suggest a synergy with this? Elara raised her hand. A Earthshaper could create conductive terrain, amplifying the lightning's area of effect. Excellent, the professor nodded. That's the kind of thinking that earns top marks here. Ethan sank lower in his seat. He thought of his skill. Control+C to copy, Control+V to paste. He'd tried it at home, copying a quill and pasting a duplicate onto his desk. It had worked, but the duplicate was lifeless, just an inert object. What use was that in combat? What synergy could it possibly have? After class, Ethan hurried out, hoping to avoid further attention. But Cedric and his friends were waiting in the corridor, leaning against the wall with casual arrogance. Leaving so soon, Clerk? Cedric said, stepping into Ethan's path. We were just discussing how unique your skill is. Why don't you show us? Copy something impressive. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. I need to get to my next class. Oh, come on, Elara purred, circling him. We're all curious. Here. She plucked a decorative crystal from a nearby sconce. Copy this. It's non-living, right? Ethan hesitated. He could feel the other students stopping to watch, forming a loose circle. His palms were sweaty. Reluctantly, he focused on the crystal in Elara's hand. In his mind, he visualized the command, Control+C. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer passed over the crystal, and he felt a slight drain, a tiny bit of his mental energy, the cost of the skill. He now held a copy in his mental buffer, a digital replica of the object. Now paste it. Marcus, the burly boy, grunted. Let's see this miracle. Ethan pointed to an empty spot on the floor. Control+V. There was a soft pop, and an identical crystal appeared, landing with a click. It was perfect in every detail, but inert, devoid of the magical glow the original possessed. Cedric stared at it, then burst out laughing. That's it. You can make cheap knockoffs? Wow, truly a world-changing power. I can see why the system gave you an F rank. The crowd joined in, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, but the words died before they reached his lips. He simply stood there, humiliation washing over him in cold waves. Pathetic, Cedric sneered, kicking the copied crystal aside. It skittered across the floor, ignored. You know, they say the dungeon tutorial is tomorrow. A real dungeon, with monsters. How do you think you'll fare, Clerk? Gonna copy some rocks and throw them? Ethan's blood ran cold. The dungeon tutorial. He'd read about it in the academy materials. All freshmen were required to participate, a controlled environment to test their skills. Controlled was a generous term. Injuries were common, and fatalities, while rare, were not unheard of. For an F rank with a useless skill, it was a death sentence. I'll manage, Ethan muttered, the words barely audible. I'm sure you will, Cedric said, his smile turning predatory. Maybe you'll get lucky and be assigned to my group. I'd love to see your copy-paste in action against a goblin. With a final laugh, Cedric and his friends turned and walked away, the crowd parting for them. Ethan was left alone in the corridor, the copied crystal lying forgotten at his feet. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. It was cool and smooth, a perfect duplicate but utterly meaningless. He made his way to the dormitories, a separate wing for low-rank students. The rooms were sparse, with simple cots and wooden desks. His roommate hadn't arrived yet. Ethan dropped his satchel on the bed and sat heavily, head in his hands. The day replayed in his mind. The mocking laughter, Cedric's lightning, the sheer hopelessness of it all. He pulled out his notebook, flipping to the page he'd started earlier. Under objective, survive, he added. Asterisk dungeon tutorial tomorrow. Skill, useless. Chances, slim, asterisk. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find a young man in a teacher's robe, holding a clipboard. Ethan Gray. Yes. I'm here to confirm your participation in tomorrow's dungeon tutorial. You've been assigned to Group 7. Report to the East Courtyard at dawn. Bring any basic gear. The Academy provides weapons for low ranks. The teacher's tone was brisk, impersonal. And a word of advice, stick close to your group. The dungeon is simulated, but the monsters are real. Your skill, well, do your best. He handed Ethan a slip of paper with the details and left without another word. Ethan stared at the assignment. Group 7. He didn't know who else was in it, but a sinking feeling told him he might already know. That evening, as he lay in the dark, the academy silent around him, Ethan's mind raced. He thought of his skill. Copy-paste. What if there was more to it? The system description said non-living matter, but what defined matter? What if he could copy something else, something intangible? He dismissed the idea as desperate fantasy. No, he was stuck with this joke of an ability. The last thing he remembered before sleep took him was Cedric's sneering face and the crackle of lightning. Tomorrow, he would enter a dungeon with monsters and nobles who despised him. He had no combat skills, no magic, just a useless ability to duplicate objects. Ethan knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was doomed. The air in the Grand Elysium Academy's assembly hall was thick with tension and the metallic scent of polished armor. Ethan stood at the edge of Group 7, his fingers nervously tracing the hem of his standard-issue Academy robe, a dull gray that perfectly matched his F-rank status. Around him, students buzzed with excitement, their voices a cacophony of bravado and fear. Cedric, the S-rank noble with flame-red hair and a smirk that could curdle milk, stood at the center of their group, flanked by his cronies, Marcus and Lila. Remember, initiates, boomed Instructor Thorne from the podium, his voice amplified by a sound enhancement skill that made the walls vibrate. The tutorial dungeon is a simulated environment, but the monsters are very real. Your objective is simple: survive for 1 hour or reach the exit chamber. The system will monitor your performance and assign grades accordingly. Ethan's stomach churned. He'd spent the night tossing in his bunk, replaying yesterday's humiliation. The way Cedric had laughed when Ethan demonstrated his copy-paste skill on a classroom crystal, producing only a faint shimmer before it faded. What's next, Clerk? Cedric had sneered. Going to copy some paperwork onto a goblin? The memory burned like acid. Now, as the massive stone doors to the dungeon ground opened with a rumble that shook the floor, Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. The entrance yawned like a dark maw, lit only by flickering blue system runes that lined the walls. Students began filing in, their footsteps echoing into the gloom. "Move it, Clerk," Cedric shoved past him, his shoulder knocking Ethan against the doorframe. "Try not to die too quickly. I'd hate to miss the show." Marcus, a burly boy with an A-rank Stone Guardian class, chuckled. "Maybe he can copy the dungeon walls and paste them in front of the monsters. Wouldn't that be something?" Lila, her S-rank arcane archer, bow already materializing in her hands, didn't even glance at Ethan. "Focus, you two. Let's get this over with." Ethan swallowed hard and followed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The dungeon corridor was narrow and damp, the air heavy with the scent of moss and ozone. System runes glowed intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe like living things. From somewhere deep within, he could hear distant growls and the skittering of claws on stone. Group 7 consisted of 10 students, Cedric's trio, Ethan, and 6 others, mostly C and D ranks who kept to themselves, their faces pale with anxiety. They moved in a loose formation, Cedric taking point with a confident stride, his hands crackling with barely contained fire magic. "First rule of dungeons," Cedric announced, his voice echoing off the walls. "Stick together and let the strong lead. That means me. Anyone falls behind, they're on their own." Ethan lagged at the back, his mind racing. His copy-paste skill hovered in his vision like a phantom interface, a simple prompt with Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V options, grayed out until he focused on a target. He'd only ever used it on inert objects, crystals, books, once a piece of fruit that had duplicated then immediately rotted. What good would it do against a monster? Could he copy a goblin's club and paste it? Where? Onto another goblin? The absurdity made him want to laugh, or maybe cry. They encountered their first monster 20 minutes in. A scuttler, a dog-sized insectoid creature with chitinous plates and razor-sharp mandibles. It emerged from a side tunnel with a hiss, beady eyes fixed on the group. "My turn," Lila said coolly. She knocked an arrow that glowed with ethereal light, drew back, and released. The projectile struck the scuttler's head with a crack, and the creature dissolved into pixels, leaving behind a small health potion that vanished into Cedric's inventory. "Nice shot," Cedric praised. "See, Clerk? That's how real skills work. Not some office trick." Ethan said nothing, his fists clenched at his sides. The encounter was over in seconds, but it left him feeling more useless than ever. He watched as Cedric's group took down 2 more scuttlers and a pair of cave imps with practiced efficiency, their skills flashing in the dim light. Marcus summoning a stone barrier, Cedric launching fireballs that left scorch marks on the walls. As they delved deeper, the dungeon grew more treacherous. The corridors widened into cavernous chambers, some with pitfalls hidden under illusionary floors that Lila had to detect with her enhanced senses. Ethan nearly fell into one, saved only by a D-rank scout named Kale who grabbed his arm at the last second. "Watch your step," Kale muttered, his eyes wide with fear. "This place is rigged." Ethan nodded gratefully, but Cedric shot them a disdainful look. "Keep up, or we'll leave you for the next batch of monsters." The turning point came when they reached a large circular chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood a massive stone altar, and atop it, a pulsating crystal that emitted a low hum. System runes covered the walls here, glowing brighter than anywhere else, forming intricate patterns that seemed to shift if stared at too long. "Exit chamber?" Marcus wondered aloud, hefting his stone shield. "No," Lila said, her voice tense. "Look!" From the shadows behind the altar, something stirred. A figure emerged, tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its body was composed of jagged rock and swirling dark energy, with eyes that burned like embers. A nameplate appeared above its head, visible only to the group. "Dungeon Guardian, Earth Wraith, Level 5 Boss." "Boss fight," Cedric breathed, a flicker of excitement in his eyes. "Perfect. Let's show this thing what S-ranks can do." But the Earth Wraith didn't wait for them to strategize. It raised a stony hand, and the ground trembled. Spikes of rock erupted from the floor, forcing the group to scatter. Marcus barely got his shield up in time, deflecting a spike that would have impaled Kale. "Attack!" Cedric shouted, unleashing a torrent of fire. The flames washed over the wraith, but it barely flinched, its rocky surface absorbing the heat. Lila's arrows peppered its torso, sticking like pins in a cushion but doing little damage. The wraith retaliated. It slammed its fists into the ground, and a shockwave rippled outward, knocking several students off their feet. Ethan stumbled back, his back hitting the wall hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. He saw Marcus's stone barrier shatter under a direct hit, the boy crying out as he was thrown across the chamber. "It's too strong," someone yelled, a C-rank healer, who was trying to tend to a gash on Kale's leg. Cedric's confidence wavered. His fire spells were having minimal effect, and the wraith was closing in, its movements slow but inexorable. Lila fired another arrow, this one aimed at its eyes, but the creature batted it aside with a casual swipe. "We need to fall back," Lila urged, her voice edged with panic. Cedric's eyes darted around the chamber, landing on Ethan, who was still pressed against the wall, trembling. A cruel idea seemed to form in his mind. "Clerk, distract it. Use your copy-paste or something," he barked. "What? I can't," Ethan stammered. "Do it, or we're all dead," Cedric snarled. Then, to his friends, "On my mark, we run for the corridor. Let the F-rank take the heat." Ethan's blood ran cold. He saw the understanding pass between Cedric, Marcus, and Lila. They weren't asking him to help. They were setting him up as a sacrifice. The other students looked horrified, but no one protested. Survival of the fittest, the Academy's unspoken law. The wraith turned its burning gaze toward Ethan, sensing his fear. It took a step forward, the ground cracking under its weight. "Now!" Cedric yelled. In a blur of motion, the S-ranks and their closest followers bolted for the entrance corridor, leaving Ethan and 3 others, Kale, the healer, and a D-rank, Tinkerer, stranded. The wraith ignored the fleeing students, fixated on the closest prey, Ethan. "They left us," Kale whispered, his face ashen. Ethan's mind raced, panic clawing at his throat. The wraith was 10 feet away, raising a fist that could crush him to paste. His copy-paste interface flickered in his vision, taunting him. What could he copy? The monster's rocky skin? Its dark energy? He focused on the wraith, trying to activate Control+C, but the skill refused to engage. It only worked on non-living systems or simple objects, not complex creatures. Desperation seized him. His eyes scanned the chamber wildly, landing on the walls covered in system runes. Among the glowing lines, he spotted something odd, a patch where the runes were distorted, flickering erratically like a corrupted file. A small, pulsing error in the dungeon's matrix, glowing with an angry red light unlike the steady blue of the others. It was a system error, a glitch. Without thinking, Ethan stretched out a hand, his fingers trembling. He focused on that glowing anomaly, and for the first time, his copy-paste skill responded with more than a grayed-out prompt. Control+C flashed bright in his mind, and he felt a strange pull, as if he were siphoning data from the very air. Copying, Dungeon Stability Matrix Fragment, error_404, unauthorized access. The message appeared in his vision, cryptic and alarming. He had no idea what it meant, only that he'd copied something he shouldn't have. The wraith was upon him, its fist descending in a slow, deadly arc. Time seemed to slow. Ethan could see the individual cracks in its stony knuckles, feel the heat of its ember eyes. Kale was shouting, the healer was praying, the tinkerer fumbling with a gadget that sparked and died. Ethan acted on pure instinct. He raised his other hand, pointing it at the wraith. His copy-paste interface shifted, Control+V, glowing with an intensity that hurt his eyes. "Paste," he whispered, the word lost in the roar of the monster. He triggered the skill. For a moment, nothing happened. The wraith's fist continued its descent, and Ethan braced for impact, his eyes squeezed shut. Then, a sound like shattering glass filled the chamber. Ethan's eyes flew open. The wraith had frozen mid-swing, its body flickering, pixels of rock and energy breaking apart and reforming in jagged, nonsensical patterns. The red error glow from the wall seemed to have transferred onto the creature, spreading across its form like a virus. The wraith let out a guttural screech that dissolved into static. Its shape contorted, limbs twisting into impossible angles, before it simply unraveled. 1 second it was there, a terrifying boss monster. The next, it was gone, vanished into a shower of glitching light that faded to nothing. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the remaining students. The system runes on the walls flickered violently, then stabilized, their blue glow returning to normal. A notification popped up in Ethan's vision, but he was too stunned to read it. Kale stared at the spot where the wraith had been, then at Ethan, his mouth hanging open. What did you do? Ethan looked at his hands, still raised in the aftermath of the paste command. They were shaking uncontrollably. He had no answer. He'd copied a system error and pasted it onto a living creature, and the creature had glitched out of existence. From the corridor, he heard footsteps, Cedric and the others, returning cautiously, their faces a mix of confusion and dawning realization. They'd seen it all from the entrance. Clerk. Cedric's voice was uncharacteristically quiet, almost wary. What was that? Ethan met his gaze, his own mind reeling with the implications. He'd just done something impossible, something that defied every rule of the system. And as he stood there in the eerie quiet of the dungeon chamber, he knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The silence that followed the Earth Wraith's disappearance was more deafening than its roars had been. Ethan stood frozen in the center of the dungeon chamber, his hands still raised in the defensive posture he'd instinctively taken. The only light came from the faint blue glow of the system interface that hovered in the air before him, pulsing with angry crimson warnings. Error, unauthorized access detected. System function, dungeon_stability_matrix_alpha, has been accessed without proper clearance. Integrity check failed. Recommendation, immediate user deletion. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The words shimmered in the air, each one a death sentence written in light. Around him, the dungeon walls, previously solid stone etched with ancient runes, now flickered like a bad hologram. Patches of reality seemed to tear and reform, revealing glimpses of raw code beneath. Streams of ones and zeros flowing like digital rivers, geometric shapes that defied normal physics, and occasional flashes of pure white void. What did I do? Ethan whispered to himself, his voice echoing unnaturally in the glitching chamber. He lowered his hands slowly, his fingers trembling. The memory of the Earth Wraith's final moments replayed in his mind, the monster's stone body fragmenting not into dust or debris, but into pixels that scattered like digital confetti before dissolving into nothingness. It hadn't died, it had been deleted. Ethan's mind raced back to the glowing error he'd copied from the dungeon wall. In his panic, he hadn't stopped to read what it was. He'd just seen it as his only chance. Now, staring at the system messages, understanding dawned with terrifying clarity. The dungeon wasn't just a physical space. It was a system construct maintained by stability matrices that kept its reality intact. And he'd just copied one of those matrices and pasted it onto a living creature. I pasted reality onto something that wasn't supposed to have it, he murmured, the realization making him lightheaded. The Wraith couldn't process the matrix. It overloaded its existence. A new message appeared, this one in calm blue text that contrasted sharply with the red warnings. Skill analysis. Copy-paste. F rank. New functionality discovered. System interface interaction. Warning. Unauthorized use may result in permanent account termination. Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding against his ribs. His skill, the joke ability everyone mocked, the useless office tool, had just interacted with the system itself. Not just copied a spell or an item, but reached into the fundamental code that governed their world. This isn't just copying skills, he breathed, a wild, dangerous hope kindling in his chest. This is cheating the system. The flickering around him intensified. A section of the floor 10 feet away dissolved into static, revealing the same glowing error he'd copied earlier. A pulsing, sickly yellow crack in reality that seemed to breathe. Ethan took an involuntary step back, his boots crunching on the scattered remains of the Wraith's earlier rock attacks. The normal dungeon debris, chunks of stone, dust, lay alongside shimmering digital artifacts, crystalline data fragments that hummed with energy and what looked like pieces of corrupted texture files, their surfaces displaying stretched, impossible images. He needed to get out. Now, Ethan turned toward the chamber's exit, a stone archway that led back through the tunnels to the dungeon entrance. But the archway was glitching too, its edges blurring and reforming. Through it, he could see not the tunnel he'd entered through, but flickering glimpses of other places, The academy courtyard, a forest at night, even what looked like a completely white room filled with floating system menus. The stability matrix I stole, Ethan realized. The dungeon's falling apart without it. He approached the archway cautiously, one hand extended. His fingers passed through the glitching threshold and came back tingling with static electricity. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through. The world dissolved into chaos. For a moment, Ethan existed nowhere and everywhere. Sensations flooded him. The smell of ozone and old books, the sound of 100 overlapping voices, the feeling of falling and standing still simultaneously. He saw fragmented visions, Cedric's smug face contorted in shock, other students running, a teacher's mouth moving in silent alarm. Then reality snapped back into place. Ethan stumbled out of the dungeon entrance and into the bright afternoon light of the tutorial grounds. He fell to his knees on the grass, gasping for air. The transition from the glitching dungeon to the stable outside world was so abrupt it left him disoriented, his senses reeling. When his vision cleared, he saw them. Everyone was staring. 30 students stood in a semicircle around the dungeon entrance, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and fear. The two teachers overseeing the tutorial, Master Kalen, a stern man with a scar across his cheek, and Instructor Mira, a younger woman with worried eyes, stood at the front, their expressions unreadable. But it was Cedric's face that Ethan focused on. The noble boy stood with his usual entourage, Marcus with his hulking frame, Liana with her delicate features now twisted in disbelief, and 3 others whose names Ethan never bothered to learn. Cedric's perfect composure had shattered. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open, and one hand was clenched so tightly around the hilt of his sword that his knuckles were white. "You," Cedric said, the single word dripping with venom. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaky. He became acutely aware of his appearance. His academy uniform torn in several places from near misses with the Wraith's attacks, his face smudged with dungeon dust, his hair disheveled. He looked every bit the F-rank failure they all believed him to be, except for the fact that he'd just walked out of a dungeon alone after the boss had mysteriously vanished. "Where are the others?" Instructor Mira asked, her voice tight with concern. "The Earth Wraith," the system alert said, "it's been removed from the instance." Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. What could he say? "I copied a system error and pasted it on the monster, and it got deleted?" They'd think he was insane. Or worse, they'd believe him. And then what? The system messages had threatened permanent account termination. He didn't know if that meant his skill would be removed, his class reset, or if he'd just ceased to exist like the Wraith had. They didn't make it. Ethan finally managed, his voice hoarse. "The Wraith had killed them before Before you what?" Master Kalen stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "The system logs show abnormal energy signatures in the chamber just before the Wraith's deletion. Signatures that match your skill activation." A murmur ran through the crowd. Students exchanged glances, some stepping back from Ethan as if he were contagious. "My skill is copy-paste," Ethan said, forcing himself to meet Kalen's gaze. "It's F-rank. You know what it does? It copies non-living objects. I tried to copy a rock to throw at the Wraith, but it didn't work. The monster just glitched out. I don't know why." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue, but it was the only plausible explanation. Nobody would believe the truth. Nobody could believe it. The idea that an F-rank skill could interact with the system itself was beyond comprehension in their world, where ranks were law and the system was God. "A rock," Cedric repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He took a step forward, his entourage moving with him like a single organism. "You expect us to believe that your pathetic office skill somehow made a B-rank dungeon boss disappear? I don't care what you believe." Ethan shot back, a spark of defiance igniting in his chest. For the first time since arriving at Grand Elysium, he wasn't cowering. He'd just survived something that should have killed him. He'd done the impossible. "The Wraith is gone. I'm alive. That's all that matters." "You killed my teammates," Cedric snarled, his composure fully gone now. "You let them die while you used some cheat. I let them die?" Ethan's voice rose, the anger he'd been suppressing for weeks finally breaking through. "You abandoned us. You used the low-rank students as bait and ran. I saw you, Cedric. You left us there to die." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Several students in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. They all knew Cedric's reputation. The noble boy from a powerful family who believed rules didn't apply to him. But accusing him publicly was something nobody did. Cedric's face flushed with rage. How dare you? Enough. Master Kalen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He looked from Ethan to Cedric, his scarred face grim. The system investigation will determine what happened. Until then, both of you will report to the headmaster's office. The rest of you, tutorial is over. Return to your dorms. As the crowd began to disperse, Ethan caught the looks directed his way. Not just the usual contempt or pity, but something new. Fear, curiosity, even a flicker of respect from a few of the other low-ranked students who'd been in his group and survived. Instructor Mira approached him, her expression softer than Kalen's. Are you injured, Ethan? No, instructor, he said automatically. Then he remembered the glitching, the system warnings. But something felt wrong in there. After the wraith disappeared, the dungeon started breaking. Myra's eyes widened slightly. She glanced at Kalen, who was already examining the dungeon entrance with a focused expression. The stone archway that normally shimmered with containment magic now flickered intermittently, in faint cracks of yellow light. Identical to the error Ethan had copied, spidered across its surface. System instability. Kalen muttered, more to himself than anyone. The dungeon core is reporting corrupted data. It's requesting a full reset. He turned to Ethan, his gaze intense. What exactly did you copy? A rock. Ethan repeated, holding the man's stare. Just a rock from the wall. For a long moment, Kalen studied him. Ethan forced himself not to look away, not to fidget. He thought of the system messages, the threat of deletion. If they found out what he'd really done. Go to the headmaster's office, Kalen said finally, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, as Ethan turned to leave, he caught Cedric's eye. The noble boy's fury had cooled into something more calculating, more dangerous. He looked at Ethan not as a useless F-rank to be bullied, but as a problem to be solved. A threat. This isn't over, office clerk, Cedric said quietly, the words meant for Ethan alone. Whatever trick you used, I'll find out. And when I do, you'll wish that Wraith had killed you. Ethan didn't respond. He just walked away, heading toward the academy's main building. With each step, the reality of what had happened settled deeper into his bones. The Earth Wraith was gone, deleted from existence. The dungeon was glitching. And he had a power nobody understood, not even him. As he climbed the marble steps to the headmaster's office, his mind replayed the moment of copying. The feeling of his skill activating, but different this time. Deeper, like he'd reached past the surface of the world and touched its underlying code. And the pasting, the way the Wraith had simply unraveled at the seams of reality. He paused outside the ornate double doors of the headmaster's office, his hand hovering over the knocker. Through the window to his left, he could see the academy grounds spread out below, students moving between classes, teachers conducting outdoor lessons, the whole ordered world of Grand Elysium functioning exactly as the system intended. But Ethan knew a secret now. The system wasn't perfect. It had errors, glitches, weak points, and he could copy them. He took a deep breath, the weight of the realization settling over him like a cloak. This changed everything. He wasn't just an F-rank failure anymore. He was something else. Something the system had marked as unauthorized. Something dangerous. The door opened before he could knock. Headmaster Arcturus stood there, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. He didn't look angry or concerned, just intensely curious. Ethan, he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. Come in. We have much to discuss about your unique performance today. As Ethan stepped into the office, the door closing behind him with a soft click, he knew his life at Grand Elysium would never be the same. The bullies, the rankings, the entire hierarchy of the academy, all of it seemed suddenly small, fragile, because he'd touched the system today, and the system had flinched. The walk back to the dormitory felt longer than the entire dungeon tutorial. Ethan's footsteps echoed in the marble corridors of Grand Elysium Academy, each sound a reminder of the eyes that followed him. Whispers slithered through the air like serpents, fragments of conversations that clung to the vaulted ceilings and ornate pillars. Did you hear? The F-rank somehow killed the Earth Wraith. Cheating, obviously. Probably used some forbidden artifact. My cousin said the system flashed red errors, unauthorized access. Ethan kept his head down, the weight of his satchel digging into his shoulder. His mind replayed the moment in the dungeon. The glowing stability matrix under his Control+C, the boss dissolving into digital static. The system's warning messages still burned behind his eyelids. Error, unauthorized access. Penalty, permanent account termination pending review. He'd lied to the teachers, claiming he'd only copied a rock fragment in panic, but Cedric's sneering face told him the noble wasn't buying it. Headmaster Arcturus's summons loomed like a storm cloud, but for now, Ethan was dismissed to his quarters. His dorm room was a cramped space on the lowest floor, reserved for F-rank students. A single narrow bed, a wooden desk scarred with initials of past occupants, and a small window overlooking the academy's trash disposal area. Ethan dropped his satchel, the thud echoing in the silence. He sank onto the bed, running a hand through his disheveled brown hair. The adrenaline from the dungeon had faded, leaving a cold, gnawing fear. What if the system really terminated him? What if Arcturus saw through his lie? But beneath the fear, a spark of curiosity flickered. His skill, copy-paste, wasn't just for mundane office tasks. It could interact with the system itself. He'd proven that. The stability matrix was a system function, hidden from normal users. If he could copy that, what else could he take? Ethan stood up, pacing the small room. His eyes fell on his textbook, Basic Elemental Spells for Beginners, left open from yesterday's feudal study session. He'd tried to cast a fire spell before, channeling mana as instructed, but as an office clerk, his mana pool was pitiful, and the spell fizzled into nothing. Now he picked up the book, his fingers tracing the diagram of a simple Ember Spark, a F-rank fire spell that produced a tiny flame. The instructions were clear: focus mana into the palm, visualize heat, and release. But what if I don't cast it? Ethan murmured to himself, his voice barely a whisper. What if I copy it? He glanced at the door, ensuring it was locked. The academy was quiet. Most students were in the dining hall for dinner, gossiping about the dungeon incident. Ethan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. This was reckless. If he messed up, he could draw more attention. But the urge to understand his power was overwhelming. Placing the textbook open on the desk, Ethan focused on the Ember Spark diagram. He raised his right hand, fingers poised in the air. Control+C, he whispered, the skill activating with a soft, digital chime that only he could hear. A faint blue outline shimmered around the diagram, and a notification appeared in his vision. Copied. Ember Spark, F-rank fire spell. Duration, 5 minutes. Ethan's breath caught. It worked. He'd copied a spell without casting it, without needing mana. The skill treated it like any other data, text, an image, a system function. Now where to paste it? His eyes scanned the room, landing on a smooth, gray river rock he used as a paperweight. Perfect. He picked up the rock, cool and solid in his palm. Aiming his left hand at it, he muttered, Control+V. Another chime, and the blue energy flowed from his fingertips, wrapping around the rock like ethereal vines. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the rock began to glow with a warm, orange light. Heat radiated from it, not enough to burn, but like a stone left in the sun. Tiny sparks danced across its surface, flickering like miniature campfires. Ethan stared, all washing over him. The rock wasn't casting the spell, it had become the spell. He set it down on the desk, and it continued to emit heat and sparks, a permanent enchantment. His mind raced with possibilities. If he could paste spells onto objects, what about skills? Stats? System errors? The dungeon matrix had glitched a boss out of existence. Could he do that to a person? A knock at the door shattered his thoughts. Ethan jumped, hastily covering the glowing rock with a cloth. Who is it? He called, trying to keep his voice steady. Ethan? It's Lila, a soft voice replied. Lila was another F-rank student, a herbalist's apprentice, with the skill, Identify Plant. She'd been kind to him once, when he'd helped her carry supplies. Ethan unlocked the door, opening it a crack. Lila stood there, her freckled face pale with worry. She was small, with messy red hair tied in a braid, and wore the plain gray robes of low-rank students. I heard what happened in the dungeon, she said, her green eyes wide. Are you okay? People are saying terrible things. Ethan let her in, closing the door behind her. I'm fine. Just a misunderstanding. Lila glanced around the room, her gaze lingering on the cloth-covered rock, from which a faint orange glow seeped. Ethan, what are you doing? If the teachers find out you're experimenting with magic. It's nothing, he said quickly, but his tone lacked conviction. He trusted Lila, but revealing his power felt dangerous. I saw Cedric and his friends in the hall, Lila whispered, leaning closer. They're furious. Cedric's bragging that he'll expose you as a cheat in front of everyone. He's planning something. A duel, I think. He says if you're so powerful, you should prove it in the training grounds. Ethan's stomach tightened. A duel? Cedric was an A-rank storm knight, with skills like lightning dash and thunderclap. In a fair fight, Ethan wouldn't last a second. But his copy-paste, could it level the field? He thought of the rock, still glowing under the cloth. If he could copy Cedric's lightning and paste it back. When Ethan asked, his voice tight. Tomorrow, after morning classes, Lila said. He's spreading the word. Everyone will be watching. Ethan, you can't accept. He'll hurt you, or worse, get you expelled for cheating if you use whatever you did in the dungeon. Ethan paced again, his mind churning. Refusing would make him look cowardly, confirming Cedric's accusations. Accepting might reveal his power, but it could also be a chance to test it further. And if he lost, the consequences didn't bear thinking about. He stopped, looking at Lila. What would you do? Lila bit her lip. I'd hide. But you're not like me, Ethan. I've seen how you look at the system, like it's a puzzle. Just be careful. If you need help, I'll be there. She squeezed his arm gently before slipping out the door. Alone again, Ethan uncovered the rock. The ember spark was still active, the spell stable. He picked it up, the warmth soothing his nerves. This was proof. His skill was real, and it could do more than anyone imagined. But he needed to practice. Copying from a textbook was one thing. Copying in combat, under pressure, was another. He spent the next hour experimenting quietly. He copied the ember spark, again from the rock, and pasted it onto a quill. It caught fire briefly before he snuffed it out. He tried copying the texture of his desk wood and pasting it onto a piece of paper, turning it rough and grainy. Each success fueled his confidence, but also his anxiety. The system notifications grew more frequent. Warning, unauthorized skill usage detected. Review imminent. He ignored them, pushing the limits. As night fell, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The duel with Cedric loomed like an executioner's axe. He replayed the dungeon incident in his mind. The panic, the instinctive use of Ctrl+C on the stability matrix. What if he could copy Cedric's lightning skill mid-fight? What if he could paste it on as Cedric himself, overloading him? The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. He drifted into a fitful sleep, dreams filled with glitching monsters and echoing laughter. In the morning, the academy buzzed with anticipation. Whispers followed Ethan to his first class, a history lecture on system origins. He sat in the back, ignoring the stares. Cedric held court at the front, boasting loudly to his cronies. Watch today, boys, Cedric said, his voice carrying. The F-rank clerk thinks he's hot stuff after accidentally killing a boss. I'll show him what real power looks like. Ethan kept his head down, but his hands clenched under the desk. After class, as students streamed out, Cedric blocked his path in the corridor. The noble was tall and broad-shouldered, with blonde hair and a smirk that never seemed to leave his face. He wore the blue and silver uniform of A-rank students, a lightning bolt emblem on his chest. Well, if it isn't the cheat, Cedric sneered, his friends forming a half-circle around Ethan. Ready to prove yourself, Clerk? Or will you run back to your dungeon hole? Ethan met his gaze, forcing calm into his voice. What do you want, Cedric? A duel. Training grounds, 1 hour. No teachers, just us and an audience, Cedric said, crossing his arms. Show me this power you used in the dungeon. If you refuse, I'll tell everyone you're a fraud, and I'll make sure the headmaster hears how you tampered with system functions. The threat hung in the air. Ethan saw Lila in the crowd, her face pale. Other students gathered, eager for spectacle. He knew he had no choice. Fine, I'll be there. Cedric's smirk widened. Good. Don't be late. Wouldn't want you to copy your way out of it. He laughed, turning away with his friends. Ethan walked to the training grounds alone, his mind racing. The area was an open courtyard of packed earth, surrounded by stone benches. Already, Dozens of students had gathered, their chatter a low hum. The sky was overcast, casting a gray light over the scene. He found a quiet corner to prepare, his heart thudding against his ribs. This was it, his first real test. He practiced his Control+C gesture subtly, focusing on a nearby training dummy. If he could copy quickly enough. When Cedric arrived, the crowd cheered. The noble strutted to the center, cracking his knuckles. "Ready to lose, Clerk?" he called. Ethan stepped forward, his plain robes feeling flimsy against Cedric's armored attire. "Let's get this over with." A student volunteered as referee, setting basic rules. No lethal force, surrender or knockout ends the match. As they took positions, Ethan's palms grew sweaty. He raised his hands. "Ready. Begin." Cedric didn't hesitate. "Lightning dash," he shouted, his body blurring with electricity as he shot forward. Ethan barely had time to react, diving to the side as Cedric slammed into the ground where he'd stood, sparks flying. The crowd roared. Ethan scrambled up, his mind screaming. He needed to copy something, anything. As Cedric charged again, Ethan focused on the crackling energy around the noble's fists. Control+C, he whispered, the skill activating. A notification flashed. Copied. Lightning charge, a rank skill. Duration, 3 minutes. But Cedric was already upon him, a fist aimed at his face. Ethan ducked, stumbling back. He had the skill copied, but where to paste it? Onto himself? He might not survive the mana surge. Onto Cedric? That could backfire. Cedric laughed. "What's wrong? Can't use your cheat without a dungeon." He raised a hand, electricity coalescing. Thunderclap. A wave of force and lightning erupted. Ethan threw himself behind a training dummy, the blast shattering it to splinters. He gasped, ears ringing. This was hopeless, he was outmatched. But as he peeked out, he saw Cedric's arrogant stance, the lightning still dancing on his fingertips. An idea sparked. What if he pasted the copied, lightning charge, back onto Cedric, but modified it? Overload it, like the dungeon boss. He aimed his left hand, focusing on Cedric's chest. Control+V. The blue energy shot out, merging with Cedric's own lightning. For a second, nothing happened. Then, Cedric's eyes widened. The electricity around him flared violently, arcs of power snapping erratically. He stumbled, clutching his chest. "What did you do?" he gasped, his voice strained. The crowd fell silent, watching in confusion. Cedric's skin glowed with excess energy, his muscles seizing. He collapsed to his knees, smoke rising from his uniform. Ethan stood frozen, realizing what he'd done. He'd pasted a skill onto a person, causing a feedback loop. It wasn't a glitch like the boss, but it was close. Cedric groaned, the lightning dissipating as he fell unconscious. The referee rushed forward, checking him. He's alive, but out cold. Ethan looked at his hands, then at the stunned faces around him. Whispers erupted again, louder now. He beat Cedric? How? That wasn't normal magic. As students crowded around Cedric, Ethan backed away, his heart pounding with triumph and terror. He'd won, but he'd also exposed a fraction of his power. And in the crowd, he saw Lila's worried face, and beyond her, a teacher watching with narrowed eyes. The chapter ends with Ethan slipping away, knowing the duel had only deepened the mystery and the danger. Cedric would wake with a vendetta, and others would start asking questions. His copy-paste skill was no longer a secret. It was a weapon, and everyone had seen its spark. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Grand Elysium Academy's central training grounds, but the light felt cold to Ethan. He stood at the edge of the dueling circle, a simple stone ring 50 feet across, worn smooth by countless clashes of magic and steel. His hands trembled slightly, and he clenched them into fists, the rough fabric of his standard-issue student robes chafing against his knuckles. Around the circle, a crowd had gathered, far larger than he'd anticipated. Students of all ranks filled the tiered stone benches that rose around the training grounds. He saw the sneering faces of nobles in their embroidered silks, the curious expressions of common-born students in their plain robes like his own, and even a few instructors standing at the periphery with folded arms and unreadable expressions. The air hummed with murmured conversations, a buzzing hive of anticipation. "Look at him," someone whispered loudly enough to carry. "The F-rank clerk thinks he can stand against Cedric. He cheated in the dungeon," another voice countered. Maybe he's got some trick. Ethan ignored them, focusing on his breathing. In his mind, he replayed the secret experiments from the previous night. The way his copy-paste skill had shimmered into existence when he focused, the glowing blue interface that only he could see appearing before his eyes. He'd practiced on inanimate objects, copying the warmth from a candle flame and pasting it onto a cold stone until it grew hot to the touch, transferring the rigidity of an iron bar to a piece of cloth that stiffened like board. But this was different. This was a person, a powerful one. Across the circle, Cedric von Alder stepped into the ring. The noble moved with a predator's grace, his crimson and gold robes swirling around him. At 17, Cedric already carried himself like a king, his sharp features set in a contemptuous smirk. Lightning crackled at his fingertips, tiny arcs of blue-white energy that snapped and hissed in the morning air. His S-rank class, Stormcaller, was displayed proudly on the system interface that hovered above his shoulder, visible to all, a shimmering badge of status that made Ethan's own F-rank, office clerk, label feel like a brand of shame. Ready to die, clerk? Cedric called out, his voice carrying across the silencing crowd. Or will you run like you did in the dungeon? Ethan felt his face heat. I didn't run, he said, his voice steadier than he expected. You left me for dead. And yet here you are, Cedric sneered. A cockroach that won't stay crushed. But today ends differently. Today, I expose your cheat for what it is and have you expelled from this academy. From the edge of the ring, Instructor Valerius, a stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair, raised a hand. Combatants ready? The duel ends at surrender, unconsciousness, or when I call it. No lethal force permitted. His eyes lingered on Cedric's crackling hands. Begin. Cedric didn't wait. He thrust both hands forward, and the air split with a thunderclap. A bolt of lightning, thick as Ethan's wrist, tore across the distance between them. Ethan threw himself sideways, hitting the stone ground hard as the lightning struck where he'd been standing. The smell of ozone filled his nostrils, and his ears rang from the thunder. Too fast, he thought, scrambling to his feet. He's not holding back. Running already? Cedric laughed, weaving his hands through the air. 3 smaller bolts shot out in quick succession, forcing Ethan into a desperate dance of dodges. He felt the heat of one bolt singe his robe sleeve, the fabric blackening at the edge. Panic clawed at Ethan's throat. This wasn't like the dungeon boss. That had been a desperate, instinctual act. This was calculated violence, and he had no plan. His copy-paste skill required focus, a moment to target something and execute the command. But Cedric gave him no moments. Another bolt came, and Ethan barely raised his arms in time. The lightning struck his crossed forearms, and pain exploded through him, a searing, numbing agony that locked his muscles. He stumbled back, his vision swimming with afterimages of light. The system notification flashed in his mind's eye. Health, 82%, minor electrical damage. Pathetic, Cedric said, advancing slowly. You see? No skill, no class worth mentioning. Just a commoner who got lucky once. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some cheered Cedric on. Others watched in uneasy silence. Ethan saw Lila in the front row, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. She'd warned him about this duel, begged him to decline. They'll kill you, she'd said. But he couldn't back down, not after the dungeon, not after the rumors had painted him as either a cheat or a hidden prodigy. Backing down would confirm the former. Cedric raised his hands again, and this time the lightning didn't shoot forth immediately. It gathered around him, a crackling aura of energy that made his hair stand on end. The skill name appeared in the air above him, glowing with system text. Lightning Charge, S-rank active skill. The description scrolled past Ethan's vision as he focused on it. Channels electrical energy into a concentrated blast, dealing massive damage and causing paralysis. Now, Ethan thought, while he's charging, he forced his mind to calm, pushing past the pain in his arms. He focused on Cedric, on the crackling energy surrounding him. In his mind's eye, he summoned his skill interface. The familiar blue screen appeared, translucent against the real world. 2 options glowed, Control+C and Control+V. He selected Control+C and aimed it at Cedric's gathering lightning. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, the interface flickered and text appeared. Target acquired. Lightning charge, S rank. Copy. Y/N. Ethan mentally confirmed. The world seemed to slow. He saw the lightning around Cedric shimmer, a portion of it peeling away like glowing silk threads. The energy flowed toward Ethan, invisible to everyone else, absorbed into his skill interface. A new entry appeared in his mental clipboard. Lightning charge, copied. Cedric finished his charge. This ends now, he roared, and unleashed the blast. The lightning tore toward Ethan, a blinding spear of pure energy. But this time, Ethan didn't dodge. He stood his ground, raised a hand, and selected Ctrl+V. He had a split-second decision. Paste it where? Onto himself? That might let him absorb or redirect it, but he had no lightning affinity. It could kill him. Onto the ground? Useless. Then he remembered his experiments, pasting properties onto objects. And Cedric was still connected to the lightning, channeling it. He aimed Ctrl+V at Cedric himself. The pasted lightning merged with the incoming blast. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. The bolt continued toward Ethan. Then it shuddered, veered off course, and curved back toward Cedric. The noble's eyes widened in shock as his own attack, now amplified by the copied version, slammed into him. The impact was deafening. Light exploded, forcing the crowd to shield their eyes. Cedric screamed, a raw, agonized sound, as lightning wreathed his body. It didn't strike and fade. It clung to him, crawling over his skin, arcing between his fingers and his own gathering energy. The two lightning sources, the original and the pasted copy, created a feedback loop, each feeding the other. What are you doing? Cedric gasped, trying to disperse the energy, but his control was gone. The lightning crackled louder, overloading his system-granted channels. His health bar, visible to all in duels, plummeted. 100%, 75%, 50%. Ethan watched, horrified. He hadn't meant for this. He'd just wanted to deflect the attack. But the paste had done something unexpected. It hadn't just added lightning to Cedric. It had fused with his existing skill, creating a recursive loop that the system couldn't handle. Cedric's body convulsed. His robe smoked. The smell of burnt fabric and ozone grew overpowering. He took a stumbling step forward, his eyes locked on Ethan with a mixture of pain and utter disbelief. You cheater. He choked out. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed face first onto the stone, the lightning around him sputtering and dying. The feedback loop had drained him completely. His health bar settled at 15%, flashing yellow to indicate critical but stable condition. Silence. For 3 long seconds, the training grounds were utterly still. The crowd stared, mouths agape. Even Instructor Valerius stood frozen, his hand half raised as if to stop a duel that had already ended. Then chaos erupted. Nobles leaped from their seats, shouting accusations. He used forbidden magic. That wasn't a skill. Common-born students murmured in awe or fear. Some pointed at Ethan, their fingers trembling. The air filled with overlapping voices, a cacophony of shock and outrage. Ethan stood in the center of it all, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked down at his hands, half expecting to see lightning dancing on them. But there was nothing, just his ordinary, trembling fingers. The copied lightning charge was gone from his clipboard, used up in the paste. Instructor Valerius finally moved, striding into the ring. He knelt beside Cedric, checking his pulse, then barked orders to nearby students. Get him to the infirmary now. 2 burly students hurried forward, lifting the unconscious noble between them. Cedric's head lolled, his face pale and slack. Valerius turned to Ethan. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a sharp intensity. What did you do, boy? I defended myself, Ethan said, his voice barely above the crowd's noise. That was no defense. That was a system anomaly. I felt it, a glitch in the skill execution. Valerius stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're a copy-paste. It did something to his lightning. Overrode it, didn't it? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Admitting it would confirm everything Cedric had accused him of. From the crowd, a noble student shouted, Expel him. He's a danger to the academy. Others took up the cry, their voices merging into a chant. Expel, expel, expel. But not everyone joined. Ethan saw Lila pushing her way to the front, her small frame jostling against taller students. He won fairly, she cried, though her voice was drowned out. A few other common-born students, ones Ethan recognized from shared classes, ones who'd also been bullied by nobles, nodded in agreement, their expressions hardening into defiance. Valerius raised a hand for silence, but the crowd ignored him. The chaos was spreading, arguments breaking out between noble and commoner factions. Ethan saw fists clenching, magic beginning to spark at fingertips. This was more than a duel's aftermath. This was a crack in the Academy's rigid hierarchy, and he'd been the hammer that struck it. Enough! A new voice boomed, cutting through the noise. Everyone fell silent. From the arched entrance to the training grounds, the Academy headmaster, Alistair Thorne, emerged. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, his deep blue robes trailing behind him. His face was lined with age and authority, his eyes like chips of flint as they swept over the scene. The system interface above him displayed his title and class, Headmaster, Archmage, SS rank, a sight that commanded instant respect and fear. He stopped at the edge of the dueling circle, his gaze settling on Ethan. "Explain," he said, the single word heavy with implication. Ethan swallowed. "Headmaster, I saw the recording," Thorne interrupted, tapping a finger against a crystal orb he carried. It glowed, projecting a holographic replay of the duel's final moments. The lightning curving back, Cedric's overload, the collapse. The crowd watched, mesmerized. "Your skill, copy-paste." It interacted with an S-rank ability in a way no F-rank skill should. The system logs show irregularities. He stepped into the ring, closing the distance between himself and Ethan. Up close, Ethan could see the calculating intelligence in the headmaster's eyes. This wasn't just about a duel. This was about something deeper. "You will come with me," Thorne said quietly, so only Ethan could hear. "Now, before this mob decides your fate for you." Ethan glanced at the crowd. The nobles glared, hungry for punishment. The commoners watched, some with hope, others with fear. Lila met his eyes, giving a slight, worried nod. "Am I expelled?" Ethan asked, his throat tight. Thorne's lips thinned. "Not yet, but you have drawn attention, Ethan. From me, from the system, and from others who will not be as curious as I am. Come." He turned and walked away, expecting Ethan to follow. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He could run, but to where? The Academy was his only home, flawed as it was, and running would confirm guilt. He took a deep breath, the scent of ozone and burnt hope filling his lungs, and followed the headmaster out of the training grounds. Behind him, the chaos erupted anew, a roaring tide of voices that echoed off the stone walls. But Ethan didn't look back. His mind raced with what had just happened, the way his pace had overloaded Cedric, the system's irregularities, the headmaster's cryptic warning. He'd won the duel, but as he walked through the Academy's grand corridors, shadows stretching long in the morning light, he knew with cold certainty he'd just started a war. And the system itself was now watching. The walk to the Grand Assembly Hall felt like a death march. Ethan's boots echoed on the polished marble floors, each step a hollow thud that seemed to mock his racing heart. Headmaster Thorne moved ahead of him, a tall, imposing figure in deep violet robes embroidered with silver runes that shimmered faintly in the torchlight. The corridors of Grand Elysium Academy were usually bustling with students, but today they were eerily empty, cleared out, Ethan realized, for whatever spectacle was about to unfold. He replayed the duel in his mind, Cedric's lightning crackling through the air, the panic that had clawed at his throat, and then the strange calm as his fingers had twitched, executing Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, with a precision that felt almost alien. The feedback loop, Cedric collapsing, the crowd's roar, it had all happened so fast. Now, the consequences were catching up. Instructor Valerius had questioned him sharply, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, but it was Headmaster Thorne's arrival that had sealed Ethan's fate. The headmaster's voice had been low, almost conversational, yet it carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. "Ethan, come with me. We need to discuss this anomaly. In public." Public. The word had sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He knew what that meant. A demonstration, a test, a chance for the Academy's elite to scrutinize his every move. And if he failed, or if his power was deemed too dangerous, expulsion was the least of his worries. The system itself had flashed those error messages in the dungeon. What if it was watching now? They reached the massive oak doors of the assembly hall, carved with scenes of legendary heroes battling monsters. Thorn paused, turning to Ethan with a gaze that seemed to pierce through him. In there, every student and faculty member awaits. They have heard rumors of your ability. Some call it a cheat, others a miracle. Today, you will show them the truth. His lips curved into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Do not disappoint me, Ethan. The system tolerates many things, but unpredictability is not one of them. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. What do you want me to do, headmaster? Demonstrate your skill. Copy something. Paste it. Prove it is not a fluke. Thorn pushed the doors open, and a wave of sound washed over them. Hundreds of voices murmuring, chairs scraping, the rustle of robes. The hall was vast, with high vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns on the stone floor. Rows of benches were filled with students, their faces a blur of curiosity, hostility, and awe. At the front, on a raised dais, sat the faculty, their expressions unreadable. Ethan spotted Cedric in the front row, his face pale but eyes burning with hatred, bandages visible on his arms where the lightning had scorched him. Thorn led Ethan to the center of the hall, where a clear space had been left. A simple wooden table stood there, holding a few objects, a glowing crystal orb, a dusty spellbook, and a small, withered plant. These are test items, Thorn announced, his voice amplified by some unseen magic to fill the hall. Ethan, you will use your skill on one of them. Choose wisely. Ethan's mind raced. Copy what? The crystal orb hummed with mana, probably a basic energy source. The spellbook might contain a simple incantation. The plant looked dead, beyond help. But as he glanced at Thorn, standing tall and commanding with an aura that seemed to bend the very air around him, an idea sparked. It was reckless, stupid even, but if he was going to be made a spectacle, he might as well make it memorable. The chapter outline had hinted at this. Copy the headmaster's aura of authority. Ethan had felt it earlier, that pressure that made people bow without thought. What if he could steal that? He took a deep breath, his fingers twitching at his sides. The skill, copy-paste, felt like a living thing in his mind now, no longer just a joke from his office clerk class. It had layers he was only beginning to understand. In the dungeon, he'd copied a system function, the stability matrix. Against Cedric, he'd copied an S-rank skill, but an aura that was intangible, a blend of presence, magic, and sheer will. Could his skill handle it? I'm ready, Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. Thorn nodded. Proceed. Ethan focused on the headmaster. He ignored the crowd, the whispers, the weight of their stares. In his mind's eye, he visualized the command, Control+C. It wasn't a physical action, but a mental pull, a reaching out with his consciousness. He felt a tug, like grasping at smoke. Thorn's aura was a complex web, strands of confidence, decades of magic, the authority granted by the system itself. Ethan's skill latched onto it, copying not just the surface feel, but the underlying structure. A notification flashed in his vision, visible only to him. Copied. Aura of command. Rank. S. Description. Imparts unwavering authority, enhances persuasion, and induces minor fear effects. Source. Headmaster Thorn. He almost staggered from the effort. Copying this was different. It drained him, a sharp headache blooming behind his eyes. But he held on, the copied aura now stored in that strange, intangible clipboard his skill provided. I've copied something, Ethan announced, his voice echoing in the silent hall. And what will you paste it onto? Thorn asked, his eyes gleaming with interest. This was the risky part. The outline said he'd paste it somewhere unexpected. Ethan's gaze swept the room. He could paste it onto the crystal orb, maybe make it glow brighter. Or onto the plant, to see if authority could revive the dead. But then he saw her, Lila, a timid first-year student sitting alone at the back, her shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear. She was an F rank like him, a herbalist, with a skill for growing weak herbs, bullied relentlessly by the nobles. Ethan had seen her crying in the library once, books scattered around her. An idea solidified, dangerous and defiant. If he was going to challenge the Academy's hierarchy, why not start with the bottom? I'll paste it onto her, Ethan said, pointing at Lila. The crowd erupted into gasps and murmurs. Lila's eyes widened in terror, and she shrank back. Thorn's eyebrows rose. An interesting choice. Proceed. Ethan focused again. Control plus V. He aimed the command at Lila, pushing the copied aura toward her. It felt like releasing a held breath. The pace wasn't instant. A shimmering light, visible only to Ethan, flowed from him to Lila, wrapping around her like a cloak. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Lila straightened. Her hunched shoulders squared, her chin lifted, and her eyes, once downcast, now held a glint of steel. She stood up, and the students near her instinctively leaned back. "What is your name, child?" Thorn asked, his voice curious. "Lila," she replied, and her voice carried across the hall, clear and confident, without a trace of its former tremor. "Do you feel different?" Lila looked around, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "I feel like I matter." And she did. The aura was working. Students who had ignored or mocked her now watched her with wary respect. Even some of the faculty shifted uncomfortably. Thorn observed, his expression unreadable. "Fascinating. You have transferred an intangible quality. This goes beyond mere skill copying. This is manipulation of essence." But Ethan wasn't done. The headache was worsening, a pounding rhythm behind his temples. He knew he was pushing his limits, but if he stopped now, they might dismiss it as a trick. He needed to show more. His eyes fell on the spellbook. "May I try another?" Thorn nodded. "By all means." Ethan opened the book. It contained a basic fire spell, Ember Spark, a D-rank ability common for novices. He focused, copying it with Control plus C. This was easier, familiar. The spell structure was simple, a pattern of mana and intent. He then looked at the withered plant, pasted the fire spell onto it. The plant didn't burst into flames. Instead, its dried leaves trembled, and a tiny, glowing ember appeared at its tip, hovering like a firefly. It was a weak manifestation, but it was magic, coming from a dead plant. The crowd murmured in awe. "He made a plant cast a spell," someone shouted. Thorn stepped closer, examining the plant. "Remarkable. You are not just copying, you are imbuing objects with abilities they should not possess. This could redefine magic theory." But his voice held a note of caution. "However, such power is not without cost. Look at you, Ethan." Ethan glanced at his hands. They were trembling, and a trickle of blood seeped from his nose. The overuse was taking its toll. His system interface flickered at the edge of his vision, showing a warning. Skill overload, 85%. Risk of system error. "I'm fine." Ethan lied, wiping the blood away. "Are you?" Thorn's gaze was piercing. "What you have done today is unprecedented, but it also draws attention. The system does not like its rules bent." He turned to the crowd, his voice booming. "This demonstration is over. Ethan, you will come with me. The rest of you, return to your classes. Let this be a lesson. Power comes in many forms, but it must be controlled." As the students began to file out, Ethan saw the reactions. Cedric glared, his fists clenched. Lila gave him a small, grateful nod before walking away with a newfound poise. The whispers followed him. Cheater, genius, monster. Thorn led Ethan out a side door, into a private corridor lined with portraits of past headmasters. "You have talent, Ethan. But talent without guidance is a danger. The system has already noted your actions. Those error messages in the dungeon were not random. It sees you as an anomaly." "What does that mean?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. "It means you are being watched. And not just by me. There are forces within the system that maintain balance. They may send enforcers." Thorn stopped before a heavy door, unlocking it with a wave of his hand. "For now, you will remain under my supervision. You will demonstrate your skill again, in a more controlled setting. But know this, if you step out of line, or if the system deems you a threat, I will not be able to protect you." Ethan's mind raced. The chapter outline had ended with him preparing to paste the aura somewhere unexpected, risking expulsion. He'd done that, and more. But the risk had escalated. He wasn't just risking expulsion, he was risking deletion, whatever that meant. As he stepped into the room, a sparse study filled with books and glowing artifacts, he realized this was only the beginning. The headmaster's offer was a leash, and Ethan had to decide how far he could push it before it snapped. He took a seat, his body aching from the strain. Thorn poured a glass of water, handing it to him. "Drink. You need to recover. Tomorrow, we begin real training." You will learn to harness your power without breaking yourself or the world. Ethan sipped the water, the cool liquid soothing his raw throat. Outside, the academy buzzed with the aftermath of his demonstration. He had copied authority and pasted it onto the powerless. He had made a dead plant cast magic. And now, he was caught between a manipulative headmaster and a sentient system that saw him as a glitch. As he set the glass down, his fingers brushed against the table, and he couldn't help but wonder, what else could he copy? And what would happen when he pasted it onto the system itself? The chapter closed with Ethan's resolve hardening. He had survived the public spectacle, but the real danger was just beginning. And his copy-paste skill, once a joke, was now the key to either his salvation or his doom. The silence in the Grand Elysium Academy's central courtyard was so profound that Ethan could hear the rustle of his own robes against his trembling legs. He stood before the raised dais where Headmaster Thorn loomed, his S-rank aura of command still humming in the air like a physical weight. The entire student body, nobles in their glittering attire, commoners in muted grays, and teachers in their formal academic garb, watched with bated breath. Ethan's fingers, still tingling from the recent use of his copy-paste skill, felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun filtering through the stained glass windows of the surrounding towers. He had just performed the impossible. With a mental command of Control+C, he had copied Thorn's aura, a shimmering, golden field of authority that made even the most arrogant nobles bow their heads. And with a flick of his wrist and a whispered Control+V, he had pasted it onto Lila, a timid F-rank, herbalist, student who usually faded into the background. The effect was instantaneous. Lila, who moments ago had been shrinking under the crowd's gaze, straightened her posture. Her eyes, once downcast, now held a steady, commanding light. When she spoke, her voice carried across the courtyard with an unnatural resonance. "You will all return to your classes," she said, and to Ethan's astonishment, the students began to shuffle away, some even bowing slightly as they passed her. Headmaster Thorn's reaction was a study in controlled fury. His face, usually a mask of serene authority, had tightened into a grim line. The golden aura around him flickered, as if disturbed by Ethan's audacity. Thorn's hands, clasped behind his back, clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Ethan could see the muscles in the headmaster's jaw working, a subtle tell that betrayed his inner turmoil. For a long moment, Thorn said nothing, his gaze fixed on Lila, who was now surrounded by a group of students asking her questions with newfound respect. The air grew heavy with tension, thick enough to choke on. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He had done it, proven his skill wasn't a fluke, but the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. A sharp pain throbbed behind his eyes, and he felt a warm trickle from his nose. He wiped it with the back of his hand, his fingers coming away stained with blood. System warnings flashed in his peripheral vision, red text scrolling too fast to read. Warning: unauthorized skill interaction detected. Stability compromised. Anomaly level rising. He pushed them aside, focusing on Thorn. This was the moment of reckoning. Finally, Thorn moved. He descended from the dais with slow, deliberate steps, his robes sweeping the polished marble floor. The crowd parted for him, a sea of students falling silent once more. He stopped before Ethan, his height making Ethan feel small and vulnerable. Up close, Thorn's eyes were a piercing blue, cold as glacier ice. "Ethan," he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "What you have done is unprecedented. To copy an S-rank aura, a skill bound to my very soul, and transfer it to another. Do you understand the implications?" Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. "I was demonstrating my skill, Headmaster. As you requested." He tried to keep his voice steady, but it wavered slightly. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, some curious, some hostile. The nobles who had bullied him, like Alistair, the S-rank pyromancer, with his sneering smile, watched from the sidelines, their expressions a mix of disbelief and envy. Thorn's lips twitched, not in a smile, but in something darker. "Demonstrating? You have disrupted the natural order. That aura is mine alone, granted by the system to maintain discipline. By placing it on that girl, you have created a temporary anomaly, a glitch in the fabric of our reality. He gestured toward Lila, who was now instructing a group of students on proper herb-gathering techniques with an authority she had never possessed. See how they listen to her? It is not her own merit, but a stolen echo of my power. And it will fade, leaving confusion in its wake. As if on cue, Lila's aura began to dim. The golden light around her flickered and dissolved like mist in the sun. She blinked, her confident posture slumping slightly, and looked around as if waking from a dream. The students around her murmured in confusion, some stepping back. Lila met Ethan's eyes across the courtyard, her expression a mix of gratitude and bewilderment. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring nod, though he felt anything but reassured. Thorn leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Ethan. But that is not what concerns me most. The system has taken notice of you, Ethan. Your skill, copy-paste, it interacts with the system's own functions in ways that should be impossible. When you copied my aura, you did not just copy the skill, you copied the system's authorization code embedded within it. I felt it, a ripple in the administrative protocols. He paused, letting the words sink in. The system is sentient, in a manner of speaking. It maintains balance. And you, with your F-rank class and your mundane-sounding skill, are an anomaly. A threat. Ethan's blood ran cold. He remembered the dungeon incident, the boss glitching out of existence, the system messages flashing error, unauthorized access. He had pushed it to the back of his mind, hoping it was a one-time fluke. But Thorn's words confirmed his worst fears. What does that mean? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. It means, Thorn said, straightening up and raising his voice so the nearest students could hear, that you require supervision. Your power is too dangerous to be left unchecked. You will come with me. He turned and began walking toward the academy's main building, a towering structure of white stone and arched windows. Ethan had no choice but to follow, his legs moving on autopilot. The crowd watched them go, whispers rising like a tide. He caught snippets. Cheat skill. System error. Headmaster's pet. The walk through the grand halls felt like a march to an execution. Portraits of past headmasters and legendary heroes lined the walls, their eyes seeming to judge him. Thorn led him to a heavy oak door at the end of a secluded corridor, engraved with intricate runes that glowed faintly. With a wave of his hand, Thorn dispelled the magical lock, and the door swung open silently. Inside was a study that spoke of power and secrecy. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves groaned under the weight of ancient tomes, their spines embossed with silver and gold. A large, mahogany desk dominated the room, its surface cluttered with scrolls and a crystal orb that shimmered with inner light. The air smelled of old parchment and ozone, the latter likely from residual magic. Thorn gestured for Ethan to sit in a high-backed chair opposite the desk. He took his own seat, steepling his fingers as he regarded Ethan with an unreadable expression. The door closed behind them with a soft click, sealing them in. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece, its hands moving with unnatural slowness. Let us speak plainly, Thorn began, his tone businesslike. Your skill, copy-paste, is not just a tool for copying spells or auras. I have reviewed the reports from the dungeon tutorial. You copied the dungeon's stability matrix, a core system function, and pasted it onto the boss, causing it to glitch into non-existence. That should have been impossible. The system's foundational codes are protected by layers of encryption that even S-rank skills cannot breach. Yet you did it with an F-rank skill. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The memory of that moment, the panic, the desperation, the blinding light as he used Ctrl+V, flooded back. I didn't know what I was doing. I just acted. Ignorance does not excuse the act, Thorn said, though there was a hint of something akin to admiration in his eyes. You have a unique gift, Ethan, one that could be leveraged for great good or great destruction. The system views you as a virus, an error that must be corrected. It will send enforcers, glitched entities designed to eliminate anomalies like you. I have seen it happen before, to others who dared to tamper with the system's rules. They were deleted. The word hung in the air, heavy with finality. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Deleted? As in killed. Worse, Thorn said, his voice grave. Erased from existence. No memory, no trace. As if they never were. The system does not tolerate threats to its integrity. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Ethan's. But I can protect you. I have resources, knowledge of the system's workings that few possess. In exchange, you will work for me. Your skill can be used to acquire things that are otherwise inaccessible. Ethan's mind raced. This was a deal with the devil, or at least, with a man who held his life in his hands. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice cautious. Thorn smiled, a thin, calculating curve of his lips. There is a vault in a rival academy, the Obsidian Spire. It contains a forbidden magic, a time-stopping spell that was sealed away centuries ago for being too dangerous. The system has locked it behind impenetrable barriers. But with your skill, you could copy those barriers, or perhaps the spell itself. I want you to retrieve it for me. Ethan's breath caught. Stealing a forbidden magic? That sounded like a one-way ticket to being deleted faster than he could say Ctrl+C. Why? What do you need it for? That is not your concern. Thorn said sharply, then softened his tone. Let us just say that there are forces at play beyond this academy. The system is not infallible, and there are those who seek to reshape it. With that spell, I could gain an advantage. And in doing so, I could ensure your safety. Refuse, and I will have no choice but to report your anomalous nature to the system directly. It will dispatch enforcers within days. Help me, and you will have my protection, and perhaps a chance to turn your useless skill into something legendary. Ethan stared at the headmaster, his thoughts a whirlwind. He remembered the humiliation of being an F-rank office clerk, the daily bullying, the despair in the dungeon. But he also remembered the awe in the courtyard when he made the plant produce fire, the respect in Lila's eyes. This power, his power, was his only weapon. If Thorn was telling the truth, the system was already coming for him. Working with Thorn might be his only chance to survive, to understand his skill, and maybe even to fight back. But trust Thorn? The man who had just threatened him with deletion? Ethan's instincts screamed that this was a trap. Yet what choice did he have? He was alone, with no allies, and a target on his back. He took a deep breath, the scent of ozone filling his lungs. If I do this, how do I know you won't betray me? That you won't just hand me over to the system once you have what you want? Thorn's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because, Ethan, you are too valuable to discard. Your skill is unique. With it, we could achieve things that have been dreamed of for generations. I am offering you a partnership, however unequal it may seem now. Help me, and I will help you unlock the true potential of copy-paste. Refuse, and you will face the system alone. The choice is yours. Ethan looked down at his hands, still stained with dried blood from the nosebleed. He thought of Lila, momentarily empowered, and the glitching boss. He thought of the system warnings flashing in his vision. He was caught between a rock and a hard place, Thorn's manipulation or the system's eradication. But in that moment, a spark of defiance ignited within him. If he was going to be used, he would use this opportunity to learn, to grow stronger, to maybe, one day, break free. He met Thorn's gaze, his own eyes hardening with resolve. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady for the first time since entering the room. But on one condition, you teach me everything you know about the system. I want to understand what I'm up against. Thorn nodded, a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Agreed. We begin tonight. The vault at Obsidian Spire is heavily guarded, but with your skill, we can bypass its defenses. Rest now, Ethan. You will need your strength. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. And remember, this stays between us. Speak of it to anyone, and our deal is void. Ethan rose from the chair, his legs shaky but his mind clearer. As he left the study, the door closing behind him with a final thud, he felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. He had just agreed to steal a forbidden magic for a man he didn't trust, with the system hunting him in the shadows. But for the first time, he had a direction, a dangerous, treacherous path, but a path nonetheless. He walked back through the empty corridor, the portrait's eyes seeming to follow him, and wondered what horrors, or opportunities, the night would bring. The heavy oak door of Headmaster Thorn's study clicked shut behind Ethan, sealing him in a room that smelled of old parchment, polished wood, and something else, the faint, metallic scent of ozone that always seemed to linger around system interfaces. Moonlight filtered through the tall, leaded glass windows, casting geometric patterns across the Persian rug that swallowed the sound of Ethan's hesitant footsteps. Thorn stood by the fireplace, his back to Ethan, silhouetted against the dying embers. The headmaster's usual aura of unshakable authority was gone. Or rather, Ethan realized with a start, it was currently residing in Lila, the timid first year who'd suddenly found herself the center of attention in the courtyard. In its place was something sharper, more dangerous. A predator's stillness. You understand now, don't you? Thorn said without turning. His voice was low, stripped of its usual theatrical resonance. What you did out there wasn't just a parlor trick. Ethan's throat felt dry. He could still feel the phantom sensation of his fingers pressing the imaginary keys, Control plus C, Control plus V, as he copied Thorn's commanding presence and pasted it onto Lila. The system had flickered in his vision then, a brief cascade of error messages in glowing blue text that only he could see. Unauthorized skill interaction detected. Source, headmaster_authority_a. Target, student_Lila_042. Override, successful. I copied your presence, Ethan said, forcing the words out. Your authority. The way people listen to you. Thorn finally turned. In the dim light, his face looked older, wearier. The lines around his eyes weren't just from age, they were from strain. You copied a system-granted administrative function, he corrected. My aura of command is an S-rank passive skill tied to my position as headmaster. It's not supposed to be transferable. It's not supposed to be copyable. He moved to his desk, a massive piece of darkwood carved with runes that pulsed faintly with mana. With a wave of his hand, he activated a privacy ward. The air shimmered briefly, and the distant sounds of the academy vanished, replaced by an oppressive silence. The system noticed. Thorn continued, his eyes fixed on Ethan. Oh, it noticed immediately. You're an anomaly, Ethan. A glitch in the code. Your copy-paste skill shouldn't exist, or if it does, it should be limited to copying low-level spells from scrolls, maybe duplicating simple items. But you copied the dungeon's stability matrix in the tutorial. You copied my aura. You're interacting with the system's own architecture. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd suspected as much. The way error messages popped up whenever he pushed his skill, the way his bullies' faces had gone pale when the dungeon boss glitched into nothingness. But hearing it confirmed by the headmaster made it real. Terrifyingly real. What happens to anomalies? Ethan asked, though he dreaded the answer. Thorn's smile was thin, humorless. The system self-corrects. It sends error enforcers, glitched entities designed to eliminate irregularities. They're not monsters from dungeons, Ethan. They're manifestations of the system's immune response. And one is already being generated for you. I've seen the alerts in the administrative logs. A cold knot tightened in Ethan's stomach. He thought of the dungeon boss dissolving into pixels, of the way the air had crackled with wrongness. How long, he whispered. A week. Perhaps less. Thorn leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. But I can protect you. I can hide your signature from the system scans, reroute the enforcer's targeting parameters. I have certain administrative privileges of my own. Why? Ethan's voice was sharper than he intended. Why would you help me? You could have expelled me, reported me to the system authorities. Because, Thorn said, his eyes gleaming with something Ethan couldn't quite identify. Greed? Fear? Your skill presents an opportunity. A unique one. The system isn't just a tool, Ethan. It's a cage. It dictates our classes, our skills, our very potential. Those born with S-rank abilities rule. Those with F-rank skills serve. It's an order that hasn't changed in centuries. But you can break the rules. You can steal what isn't yours. He opened a drawer and withdrew a small, crystalline orb. It glowed with an inner light, projecting a holographic map into the air between them. Ethan recognized the layout. The rival academy, Solaris Athenaeum, located across the city on the fortified skyward spire. The map zoomed in on a subterranean level, highlighting a vault marked with warning runes. Inside Solaris Athenaeum's vault, Thorn said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is a forbidden artifact. A spell scroll containing Chronolock, a time-stopping magic of legendary rank. It was sealed away decades ago by mutual accord between the academies. Too dangerous, too unstable. But with your skill, you want me to steal it. Ethan finished, the pieces clicking into place. You want me to copy it. Copy it, yes. And bring the copy to me. Thorn's gaze was intense. Imagine it, Ethan. A spell that can stop time itself. With it, we could reassess the balance of power. Protect the Academy from threats even the system cannot foresee. Ethan's mind raced. The risk was enormous. Infiltrating a rival academy, breaking into a secured vault, stealing forbidden magic. If he was caught, he'd be imprisoned or worse. But Thorn's offer of protection against the Error Enforcer was the only lifeline he had. And beneath the fear, a spark of something else ignited: ambition. For so long, he'd been the useless F-rank, the office clerk everyone mocked. But now he had a power that even the headmaster feared. A power that could change everything. What's in it for me? Ethan asked, surprised by his own boldness. Besides not being deleted by a glitch monster. Thorn's smile returned, a little warmer this time. Knowledge. I'll teach you what I know about the system, its weaknesses, its backdoors. I'll show you how to refine your skill, to use it without triggering alerts. And when we have the chronolock, well, let's just say that those who helped acquire it will have a place in the new order. Ethan studied the holographic map. The vault's security was detailed. Arcane wards, guardian constructs, motion sensors tied to the system's alert network. It was a suicide mission for anyone else. But for someone who could copy system functions. He thought of Lila, standing tall in the courtyard with Thorn's aura, commanding respect she'd never known. He thought of his bullies, their sneers turning to shock. He thought of the system, an invisible tyrant deciding his worth with a cold, algorithmic judgment. I'll do it, Ethan said, the words leaving his lips before he could second-guess himself. But on one condition: you teach me first. Show me how to hide from the system, how to copy without leaving traces. Thorn nodded, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. Agreed. We have little time. The infiltration must happen in 3 nights, during the Lunar Eclipse Festival. Solaris will be distracted by the celebrations, their security at its lowest. Meet me here tomorrow at dusk. We'll begin your training. He deactivated the privacy ward, and the sounds of the academy flooded back. Distant laughter, the chime of the hour bell. Ethan felt strangely detached, as if he were watching himself from afar. He'd just agreed to become a thief, a conspirator. But for the first time since arriving at Grand Elysium, he didn't feel powerless. As he turned to leave, Thorn's voice stopped him at the door. Ethan, one more thing. Tell no one of this. Not your few friends, not even the walls. The system has ears everywhere. Ethan nodded, his hand on the cool brass doorknob. I understand. He stepped out into the corridor, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. The hallway was empty, lit by flickering mana lamps that cast long, dancing shadows. Ethan leaned against the wall, taking a deep, shuddering breath. His hands were trembling. System alert. New quest generated, flashed in his vision. Quest: Heist of the Chronolock. Objective: infiltrate Solaris Athenaeum Vault and copy forbidden magic. Reward: Headmaster's protection, system knowledge. Failure penalty: Error Enforcer deployment, imprisonment, possible deletion. He dismissed the alert with a thought, a skill he was slowly learning to control. The weight of the quest settled on his shoulders, heavy and real. But beneath the fear, a strange excitement bubbled. This was his chance, to prove he wasn't just a useless office clerk, to seize power from the very system that had condemned him. For the next 2 days, Ethan met with Thorn in secret. The headmaster's study became a classroom for subterfuge. Thorn taught him how to mask his skill's signature, wrapping his copy-paste activations in layers of benign system noise, copying a page from a book, duplicating a quill, anything to make the activity seem mundane. He showed Ethan how to identify security wards, their glowing runes visible only to those with administrative access or, apparently, to someone whose skill could interact with the system's code. Most wards are designed to detect mana fluctuations or unauthorized skill usage, Thorn explained, tracing a finger over a diagram of the vault's defenses. But your skill, it doesn't use mana in the conventional sense. It hijacks the system's own functions. That's your advantage. You can copy the ward's detection parameters and paste a looped, all-clear signal back into it. Ethan practiced on smaller scales, copying the lock mechanism on Thorn's desk drawer and pasting it onto a practice dummy, causing it to spring open. Copying the light-emitting property of a mana lamp and pasting it onto a book, making its pages glow. Each success was met with a nod from Thorn, each failure with a patient correction. Remember, Thorn said on the eve of the heist, as they pored over the final plans. The chronolock scroll is protected by a temporal stasis field. It exists outside of normal time. Touching it directly will age you to dust in seconds. But your skill doesn't require physical contact. You can copy it from a distance, as long as you have line of sight. Ethan memorized the routes, through the festival crowds, into the skyward spire via a maintenance tunnel Thorn had secured access to, past the guard rotations timed to the second. He was given a set of dark, non-reflective clothing and a charm that would mask his life signature from basic scans. "Meet me at the western gate at midnight," Thorn instructed. "I'll create a distraction at the main entrance. You'll have a 20-minute window to get in and out." That night, Ethan lay in his dormitory bed, staring at the ceiling. His roommate, a snoring B-rank herbalist, was oblivious. Outside, the lunar eclipse festival was in full swing. Fireworks painted the sky in bursts of color, and the distant sounds of music and celebration drifted through the window. Normally, Ethan would have been hiding in his room, avoiding the crowds. Now, he was preparing to break into the most secure facility in the city. He thought about backing out. He could flee the academy, try to disappear. But the error enforcer would find him. Thorn had made that clear. And running meant giving up the only power he'd ever had. No, he'd come too far to quit now. When the clock tower chimed 11, Ethan slipped out of bed. He dressed in the dark clothing, the fabric whisper soft against his skin. The charm hung around his neck, cool and heavy. He paused at the door, looking back at his sleeping roommate. For a moment, he envied the simplicity of that life, going to classes, grinding skills, dreaming of modest achievements. But that wasn't his path anymore. He crept through the silent halls of Grand Elysium, avoiding the patrols of prefects. The academy felt different at night. Older, more mysterious, as if the stones themselves held secrets. He reached the western gate, a small, rarely used entrance hidden behind overgrown ivy. Thorn was already there, dressed in unassuming traveler's robes. In the moonlight, he looked like any other festival goer, not the powerful headmaster of an elite academy. "Ready?" Thorn asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ethan nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. "Remember the plan. Stick to the shadows. If anything goes wrong, abort and return here. I'll cover your escape." Thorn placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, a surprisingly human gesture. "Good luck, Ethan. The future may well depend on tonight." Then they were moving, slipping through the gate and into the bustling streets of the city. The Lunar Eclipse Festival was a riot of color and sound. Street performers juggled balls of light, vendors sold glowing sweets, and revelers danced under the twin moons, one of which was slowly being swallowed by shadow. Ethan kept his head down, weaving through the crowd, following the route he'd memorized. The skyward spire loomed ahead, a needle of white stone piercing the sky. Its base was guarded, but Thorn's distraction, a staged accident involving a runaway festival float, drew the guard's attention. Ethan ducked into the maintenance tunnel, a narrow, damp passage that smelled of ozone and rust. His heart pounded as he navigated the labyrinthine service corridors, his footsteps echoing in the silence. According to the map, the vault was 3 levels down. He passed humming mana generators and pipes that throbbed with heat. Once, he heard voices and pressed himself into a shadowy alcove as 2 Solaris guards walked by, complaining about missing the festival. Finally, he reached the vault door, a massive slab of enchanted steel etched with glowing runes. This was it, the point of no return. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the imaginary keys. Control+C, he thought, focusing on the ward's detection runes. The system flickered in his vision, lines of code scrolling past. Copying, security_ward_alpha. Source, vault_door_001. Status, complete. He pasted the copied parameters back into the ward, overlaying them with a looped, all-clear signal. The runes dimmed briefly, then resumed their glow, none the wiser. With a soft click, the vault door slid open, revealing a chamber beyond. Ethan stepped inside, the door sealing behind him. The vault was cold, lit by a pale, sourceless light. Shelves lined the walls, holding artifacts that pulsed with dangerous energies. A sword that wept shadows, a crown that whispered promises, a mirror that reflected not his face, but 100 possible futures. And there, on a pedestal in the center of the room, was the chronolock scroll. It floated in a bubble of distorted time, the air around it shimmering like heat haze. Ethan could feel the wrongness of it, a pressure against his senses, as if reality itself was strained around the artifact. He approached slowly, his training with Thorn guiding his movements. He didn't touch the temporal stasis field. Instead, he focused on the scroll within. His skill activated, the familiar sensation of something being selected in his mind. Copying. Forbidden magic, chronolock. Source. Ancient_scroll_artifact. Warning. Temporal anomaly detected. Proceed. Y/N. Ethan chose Y. The scroll's essence flowed into him, a torrent of complex, alien code that made his head ache. It was unlike anything he'd copied before, not a simple spell or a system function, but a fundamental manipulation of time itself. The system alerts flashed faster, more urgently. Unauthorized copy attempt. Source. Anomalous_skill_user. Alert level. Critical. He ignored them, pushing through the pain. Almost there. And then, the vault's silence was shattered by a blaring, ear-splitting alarm. Red lights strobed, casting the room in pulses of crimson. A robotic voice echoed from hidden speakers. Intruder alert. Vault breach detected. All security protocols engaged. Ethan's blood ran cold. They'd been discovered. The heist was blown. He finished the copy, the chronolock, magic settling into his skills clipboard, a strange, weightless presence in his mind. But as he turned to flee, the vault door remained sealed, and from the shadows of the chamber, the air began to tear open, a jagged, glitching rift forming, from which something monstrous was emerging. The air in Solaris Athenaeum's vault tasted of ozone and old parchment. Ethan stood frozen, his fingers still tingling from the phantom sensation of pressing Ctrl+C. Before him, the scroll containing the forbidden magic, chronolock, glowed with an eerie, pulsating light that had now dimmed to a faint shimmer. The intricate silver runes etched across its surface seemed to writhe, like living things before settling back into stillness. He could feel the stolen knowledge humming in his mind, a complex web of temporal equations and arcane commands that threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. The skill description flashed behind his eyelids, a system notification only he could see. Skill acquired. Chronolock, forbidden tier. Effect. Temporarily suspends temporal flow within a 10-meter radius for up to 30 seconds. Cooldown, 24 hours. Warning. Unauthorized access detected. I did it. Ethan whispered to himself, his breath fogging in the suddenly cold air. The vault around him was a circular chamber of polished obsidian, lined with crystalline shelves holding other forbidden artifacts. Some pulsed with malevolent energy, while others lay dormant, their power sealed behind layers of magical wards. The only illumination came from floating orbs of blue light that cast long, dancing shadows across the walls. His heart hammered against his ribs. Headmaster Thorn's training echoed in his memory, the old man's voice sharp with urgency. The moment you copy something of that magnitude, the system will know. You'll have seconds, maybe less, before it responds. Ethan's hands trembled as he raised them. The familiar keyboard interface of his copy-paste skill materialized before him, translucent and glowing with soft blue light. His fingers hovered over the Ctrl+V key. Pasting the spell onto himself was the plan. Thorn had insisted it was the only way to truly control the magic and mask its signature from the system's detection algorithms. But something felt wrong. The air grew heavier, pressing down on him like physical weight. The floating light orbs flickered, their steady glow becoming erratic. From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw the shadows begin to twist and contort, pulling away from the walls to form unnatural shapes. No time to hesitate, he muttered, swallowing hard. His throat was dry as dust. He pressed Ctrl+V. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of cold so intense it burned swept through his body. Ethan gasped, doubling over as temporal energy flooded his veins. It felt like ice and lightning simultaneously, a paradox made physical. His vision blurred, and when it cleared, the world had changed. The vault was now shrouded in monochrome gray. Everything was still, completely, utterly motionless. The floating orbs hung frozen in midair, their light static. Dust particles visible in the blue illumination were suspended like tiny stars. Even the air felt thick and unmoving in his lungs. Chronolock active. 30 seconds remaining. The notification burned in his vision. Ethan straightened slowly, marveling at the absolute silence. He could move freely within the time-stopped bubble, but everything beyond his personal space was locked in temporal stasis. He took a tentative step toward the vault entrance, his boots making no sound on the polished floor. Then he saw it. At the chamber's center, where no shadow should have been, a patch of darkness was moving. It defied the time-stop, a swirling vortex of corrupted pixels and glitching light. Colors bled into each other nonsensically. Neon green melted into violent purple, while jagged lines of static crackled around its edges. The vortex expanded, tearing at reality itself like a corrupted file trying to load. Error enforcer. Ethan breathed, the words barely audible even in the perfect silence. Headmaster Thorne's warning screamed in his mind. When the system detects an anomaly it cannot immediately delete, it creates error enforcers, glitched entities designed to eliminate the source of corruption. They exist outside normal system parameters. Your copy-paste may not work as expected against them. The vortex stabilized into a humanoid shape, though humanoid was a generous term. It stood 7 feet tall, its form constantly shifting between solidity and digital fragmentation. One moment it had too many limbs, the next too few. Its face was a blur of mismatched features, a glowing red eye where an ear should be, a mouth that opened vertically instead of horizontally. Data streams scrolled across its torso like prison bars, displaying error codes in a language Ethan somehow understood. Error 0x7b. Temporal anomaly detected. Error 0xC1. Unauthorized skill acquisition. Termination protocol. Engaged. The creature turned its head, or what passed for a head, toward Ethan. The single red eye fixed on him with predatory focus. Chronolock. 15 seconds remaining. Ethan's mind raced. The time stop was his advantage, but it was draining fast. He needed to act. His fingers flew to his skill interface, pulling up, copy-paste. The keyboard glowed brighter as he targeted the error enforcer. Control+C. Nothing happened. He tried again, focusing on the glitching form. The system notification flashed red. Target error. Cannot copy unstable entity. Source data corrupted. Damn it, Ethan hissed. Thorne was right. The enforcer's glitched nature made it immune to normal copying. The creature took a step forward. Its movement was jerky, skipping frames like a damaged video file. With each step, the time-stopped environment around it flickered, patches of the vault returning to normal motion for split seconds before freezing again. It was disrupting the chronolock just by existing. Think, Ethan, think. He remembered his first dungeon, how he'd copied the stability matrix. That had been a system function, not a creature. Maybe he couldn't copy the enforcer itself, but he could copy what it was doing. He focused on the air around the creature, where reality itself was glitching. The copy-paste interface shifted, recognizing a new target, not the entity, but the corruption effect emanating from it. Control+C. This time it worked. A new skill appeared in his inventory. Skill acquired. Reality glitch, error tier. Effect. Temporarily destabilizes local reality, causing random system errors in a 5-meter radius. Duration. 10 seconds. Warning. Unstable skill may cause backlash. Chronolock. 5 seconds remaining. The error enforcer was 10 feet away now, close enough that Ethan could see the individual pixels composing its form. It raised an arm that shifted between a claw and a blade made of solid light. Ethan didn't hesitate. He targeted the vault floor between them and pressed Control+V. The pasted reality glitch erupted like a digital explosion. The obsidian floor dissolved into a kaleidoscope of broken textures. Stone became water, became fire, became static, all within the same square meter. The error enforcer stumbled as the ground beneath it ceased to obey physical laws. Chronolock. 1 second remaining. The time stop collapsed. Sound and motion returned in a dizzying rush. The floating orbs resumed their gentle drift. Dust particles swirled, and the error enforcer let out a sound that wasn't a sound. A screech of corrupted data that vibrated in Ethan's teeth rather than his ears. But the creature wasn't defeated. It adapted, its form stabilizing as it stepped out of the glitched zone. The reality distortion faded behind it, the floor returning to normal. Ethan backed toward the vault entrance, his mind working furiously. The chronolock was on cooldown. The reality glitch had barely slowed the enforcer. He needed something stronger. His eyes darted around the vault, landing on the other forbidden artifacts. A sword that drank light. A crown that whispered madness. A orb containing a miniature storm. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. The error enforcer advanced, its movements smoother now, more purposeful. It had learned. It had adapted. Then Ethan remembered Headmaster Thorne's final lesson. The system operates on rules, even when creating exceptions to those rules. Error enforcers are glitches, but they're still part of the system. Find what anchors them to reality and cut the cord. What anchored it? The data stream scrolling across its torso. The error codes. Ethan focused his copy-paste on the glowing Error 0x7b. Temporal anomaly detected text. His interface highlighted it. A system message, not a creature. Something he could copy. Control+C. Skill acquired. Error code 0x7b. System tier. Effect. Flags target as temporal anomaly for system cleanup. Note. This is a diagnostic tool, not a combat skill. Not a combat skill. But maybe he didn't need combat. The error enforcer was 5 feet away now. It raised both arms, which solidified into twin blades of crystalline data. Ethan targeted the creature's own torso and pressed Control+V, pasting the error code back onto its source. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the error enforcer froze mid-swing. The data streams across its body accelerated into a blur. New messages flashed. Conflict, entity self-flagged as anomaly. Protocol error, termination target matches cleanup target. Resolution, immediate self-quarantine. The creature began to dissolve from the inside out. Pixels scattered like ash. Its form unraveled into strands of pure light that then fragmented into nothingness. The red eye fixed on Ethan one last time, not with malice, but with something almost like recognition. The system seeing itself in the anomaly it had created. Then it was gone. The vault was silent again, but now the silence felt heavy with aftermath. Ethan slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Sweat soaked through his thief's garb, dark, form-fitting clothes Thorne had provided for the infiltration. He'd done it. He'd survived his first error enforcer. But as his breathing slowed, he noticed something. The vault entrance, a massive door of enchanted bronze, was still sealed. The alarms that had triggered when he copied the chronolock were silent now, but the security lockdown remained active. And in the spot where the error enforcer had vanished, a small, glitching portal remained. It was no larger than a dinner plate, hovering at chest height. Through it, Ethan could see not the vault wall, but a space of pure white, the sterile, empty whiteness of a system interface with no content loaded. And from that whiteness, shapes were beginning to form. More of them. The system hadn't sent one error enforcer. It had sent a protocol, and the first had just been the scout. Ethan pushed himself upright, his body aching with exhaustion and adrenaline crash. The chronolock cooldown timer in his vision showed 23 hours, 59 minutes remaining. The reality glitch skill was spent. He had the error code copying ability, but using it again would likely just create another recursive conflict that might not end in his favor. The portal expanded, inch by inch. Through it, Ethan could now see multiple figures taking shape, taller than the first, with more defined glitches, armed with weapons that looked like corrupted versions of standard system tools. He was trapped in a vault with forbidden magic he barely understood, and the system was sending an entire cleanup crew. His fingers found the copy-paste interface again. He still had one option, the artifacts around him. Dangerous, unpredictable, possibly catastrophic. But maybe catastrophic was what he needed. His eyes settled on the orb containing the miniature storm. Lightning crackled within its crystal shell. As the first of the new error enforcers began to step through the portal, its form solidifying into a nightmare of broken geometry and screaming data streams, Ethan made his choice. He reached for the storm orb, and his fingers began the familiar dance of theft once more. The vault of Solaris Athenaeum had become a battlefield of fractured reality. Ethan stood panting in the center of the circular chamber, the forbidden magic, chronolock, still humming within him like a second heartbeat. Around him, the air shimmered with residual time distortion, a side effect of his desperate activation moments earlier. The first error enforcer had dissolved into pixels of corrupted light, but the portal it emerged from remained, a jagged tear in space that pulsed with sickly green energy. From that tear, more shapes were coalescing. Two new error enforcers stepped through, their forms shifting and glitching with every movement. They were humanoid in basic shape, but their edges blurred like bad video compression, and their faces were featureless voids except for flickering red error codes that scrolled across where eyes should be. One stood 7 feet tall with elongated limbs that twitched at unnatural angles. The other was shorter but denser, its body crackling with static electricity that made the air smell of ozone. Ethan's mind raced. The chronolock spell had cost him. He could feel a temporal fatigue settling in his bones, as if he'd aged years in seconds. His copy-paste skill interface floated in his vision, the familiar Control+C and Control+V icons glowing faintly. He'd never faced multiple enemies before, let alone ones that seemed to break the rules of reality itself. System entities detected, error enforcers Alpha, 7, and Beta, 3, a notification flashed. Warning, direct combat not recommended for F rank, office clerk. No kidding, Ethan muttered under his breath. He backed toward a display case containing what looked like crystalline orbs. The vault was vast, 100 feet across with vaulted ceilings lost in shadow. Shelves lined the walls, holding artifacts that glowed with dangerous energies. In the distance, the main entrance was sealed by the headmaster's security runes, a shimmering barrier of blue light. The taller enforcer, Alpha, 7, moved first. It didn't walk so much as teleport in short, glitchy bursts, appearing 5 feet closer with each flicker. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He raised his hands, the motion for Control+C, instinctual now. He focused on the enforcer's glitching form, trying to isolate what made it unstable. Copy target, error enforcer Alpha, 7. Scanning. The interface showed a chaotic mess of data, corrupted skill fragments, system error codes, something labeled reality distortion field. Ethan selected the distortion field, his fingers making the familiar keyboard motion. Control+C successful, reality distortion field, copied to clipboard. Beta, 3 charged, its static crackle intensifying. Ethan dove behind a stone pedestal holding an ancient sword just as lightning arced past, scorching the marble floor. He could hear the headmaster's voice in his memory. The system protects its secrets, boy. These enforcers are its immune response. Ethan peeked over the pedestal. Beta, 3 was closing in, its glitching form leaving afterimages. He needed to test his theory. As the enforcer raised a crackling fist, Ethan focused on Alpha, 7 across the room and made the paste motion. Control+V, reality distortion field, applied to error enforcer Alpha, 7. The effect was immediate. Alpha 7's glitching intensified exponentially. Its form began to stretch and compress like taffy, error messages flashing across its body. Fatal error, conflicting reality parameters. It let out a soundless scream, its featureless face contorting as its own distortion field interacted with the copied one in catastrophic feedback. It worked, Ethan thought, a surge of triumph cutting through his fear. But he had no time to celebrate. Beta, 3 was upon him, its fists swinging down. Ethan rolled aside, the static discharge grazing his shoulder and sending painful jolts through his system. He could feel his copy-paste interface flicker. The enforcer's energy was interfering with his skill. He scrambled to his feet, putting distance between them. Alpha, 7 was now a swirling vortex of corrupted data, pulling nearby artifacts into its distortion. A glowing staff toppled from a shelf and dissolved into pixels as it touched the field. Ethan realized with dawning horror that if the enforcer destabilized completely, it might take the entire vault with it. Beta, 3 advanced methodically, its movements less glitchy but more purposeful. It seemed to be learning from its partner's fate. Ethan backed toward the portal, his mind racing through options. He could try copying Beta 3's static charge, but what would he paste it onto? The other enforcer was already a lost cause. Then he remembered the chronolock. The spell was still active within him, a reservoir of frozen time he could tap into. but using it again so soon might drain him completely. The headmaster had warned. Temporal magic exacts a price proportional to its use. Beta 3 lunged. Ethan didn't think, he reacted. He focused on the enforcer's crackling form and used Ctrl+C. The interface struggled, error messages popping up. Target contains unstable system protocols. Copy may be incomplete. He ignored them, forcing the copy through. Ctrl+C successful. Static overload protocol, copied to clipboard. Now for the paste. He looked at Beta 3, then at the still glitching Alpha 7. An idea formed, dangerous, desperate. He targeted Alpha 7's distortion field again and made the paste motion. Ctrl+V, static overload protocol applied to reality distortion field on error enforcer Alpha 7. The combination was volatile. Alpha 7's form erupted in a cascade of lightning and spatial tears. The distortion field expanded violently, swallowing artifacts and shelving units. Beta 3 hesitated, its programming seemingly confused by the cascading system failures. Ethan didn't wait. He turned and ran toward the vault entrance, his legs pumping. Behind him, he could hear the screech of rending reality. He reached the blue barrier, the headmaster's runes glowing brightly. "Open," he shouted, hoping the headmaster was monitoring from outside as promised. The barrier didn't budge. Ethan pounded on it. "Headmaster, the enforcers are destabilizing. Let me out." Silence. A cold dread settled in Ethan's stomach. He turned back. Alpha 7 had collapsed into a singularity of glitched light, pulling everything toward it. Beta 3 was fighting the pull, but its form was beginning to fragment. The portal behind them flickered, as if struggling to maintain connection. Then the headmaster's voice came through a communication rune beside the barrier, calm and measured. "Ethan, I see you've acquired the chronolock. Excellent work. Let me out." Ethan yelled. "The whole vault's going to collapse." In a moment, the headmaster said, "First, I need you to do something. Use your copy-paste on the chronolock, spell within you, and transfer it to this containment orb." A small, crystalline orb materialized on Ethan's side of the barrier, hovering in midair. It glowed with absorption runes. Ethan stared at it, then at the chaos behind him. The singularity was growing, consuming the floor in a spiral of disintegrating matter. "You want me to copy the spell now?" While that's happening, the system's attention is divided by the enforcer's destruction, the headmaster explained, his voice devoid of urgency. "This is the perfect moment. Copy the spell into the orb, and I'll let you through." Ethan's mind screamed betrayal, but what choice did he have? He could feel the chronolock within him, a complex weave of temporal energy. Copying it would be the most difficult thing he'd ever attempted. He focused inward, bringing up his interface. Copy target. Internal skill, chronolock. The data was immense, layers upon layers of magical coding. His head began to throb with the strain. "Faster, boy," the headmaster urged. "The enforcer's collapse is creating a system blind spot, but it won't last." Ethan pushed through the pain. The copy progress bar inched forward, 20%, 40%, 60%. Behind him, Beta 3 finally succumbed, its form dissolving into the singularity. The portal snapped shut with a sound like breaking glass, but the singularity remained, now the size of a small room and growing. 80%, 90%, 100%. Ctrl+C successful. Chronolock, copied to clipboard, the interface announced. Ethan was drenched in sweat, his vision swimming. He gestured toward the orb. Ctrl+V. The spell transferred in a stream of silver light, pouring from his chest into the crystal. As the last of it left him, he felt hollow, drained. The orb glowed brightly, then dimmed as the runes sealed it. "Now let me out," Ethan gasped, leaning against the barrier for support. The barrier remained. The headmaster's voice came again, colder now. "Thank you, Ethan. You've been most useful." "What?" "You promised." "Promises are for those who play by the rules," the headmaster said. "And you, my boy, are the ultimate rule breaker. The system wants you eliminated, but your skill, it's too valuable to waste. I'll take the chronolock for my own purposes. As for you, consider this vault your tomb. The singularity will consume everything, and the system will record your death as another glitch casualty. Neat and tidy." Ethan's blood ran cold. You're working with the system? Working with? No. Using, like I use everything, the headmaster said. The system and I have an understanding. It gets to eliminate a threat, and I get forbidden magic. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a spell to master. The communication rune went dark. Ethan slammed his fists against the barrier. No. The singularity was 20 feet away now, pulling at his clothes, his hair. Artifacts flew past him into the void. He could feel his strength failing. Without the chronolock, and after the intense copying, he was running on empty. His copy-paste interface flickered weakly. He looked around desperately. The barrier was impenetrable. He'd seen the headmaster create it with admin-level runes. The singularity was death. The vault had no other exits. Then his eyes fell on the spot where the portal had been. Though the portal itself was gone, the air still shimmered with residual gateway energy. And in that shimmer, he could see faint system coding, the same kind he'd copied from the first enforcer. An idea born of pure desperation. The barrier was a system-based lock. The portal residue was system energy. What if? He staggered toward the shimmering air, fighting the pull of the singularity. It was like wading through thickening mud. Each step took monumental effort. He reached the spot and raised trembling hands. Copy target, residual portal system coding. He commanded his interface. The data was fragmented, corrupted from the enforcer's destruction. But there was enough, a string of gateway protocols, access keys, spatial coordinates. Control plus C successful. Corrupted gateway protocols, copied to clipboard. Now for the insane part. He turned back to the barrier, to the headmaster's runes. They glowed with complex protection magic, but at their core, they were system commands. He focused on the strongest rune, a sigil of containment that pulsed with blue light. Control plus V. Corrupted gateway protocols applied to containment rune. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rune began to glitch. Its blue light flickered green, then red. Error messages scrolled across its surface. The barrier wavered, becoming translucent. Ethan didn't hesitate. He threw himself at it just as the singularity reached the spot where he'd been standing. The barrier resisted for a heartbeat, then shattered like glass as the corrupted protocols overwrote its programming. He tumbled through into the corridor beyond, rolling across cold stone. Behind him, the vault collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. The singularity consumed everything. Artifacts, shelves, the very walls, then snapped out of existence, leaving only a perfect sphere of nothingness where the vault had been. Ethan lay on the floor, gasping. He was alive. Barely. The chronolock was gone, stolen. The headmaster had betrayed him, and the system now knew exactly what he was capable of. He pushed himself up, his body protesting every movement. The corridor was empty, silent. Somewhere in the academy, the headmaster was undoubtedly examining his new prize. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Rage burned through the exhaustion, a cold, focused fury. He'd been used, played for a fool. The headmaster had seen him as nothing more than a tool to be discarded. No more. Ethan whispered to the empty hallway. No more being the pawn. He stood, leaning against the wall for support. His copy-paste interface stabilized, the icons glowing steadily once more. He had no powerful magic now, just his original skill. But he had something else, knowledge. Knowledge of the headmaster's betrayal. Knowledge that the system and the academy's leadership were intertwined. And knowledge that his skill could break even the strongest locks when applied creatively. He began walking down the corridor, each step firmer than the last. The vault's destruction would be discovered soon. He needed to disappear, to plan. The headmaster thought him dead, consumed by the singularity. That was an advantage. As he reached a junction, he looked back at the sphere of nothingness that had been the vault. The system had tried to kill him with enforcers. The headmaster had tried to kill him with betrayal. Both had failed. Ethan smiled, a grim, determined expression. You wanted a threat eliminated, he thought, addressing the absent powers that had conspired against him. You just created your worst nightmare. He turned the corner and vanished into the academy's shadows, a ghost with a copy-paste skill and a vow of vengeance burning in his heart. The darkness of the vault was absolute, broken only by the faint, dying glow of corrupted system runes that Ethan had used to escape the singularity. He lay on cold stone, his breath coming in ragged gasps that echoed in the vast, empty space. The air tasted of ozone and burnt magic, a sharp reminder of the error enforcers he'd just barely survived. But survival felt hollow now, trapped, betrayed, and alone. Ethan pushed himself up, wincing as pain shot through his limbs. The vault, once a treasure trove of forbidden magics, was now a tomb. The walls, inscribed with shimmering runes that had once pulsed with power, were dark and silent. In the center of the room, where the portal had been, a jagged scar of black energy crackled faintly, the last remnant of the singularity that had consumed the error enforcers. He could still feel the residual heat, a phantom warmth that did nothing to chase away the chill in his bones. His mind raced, replaying the headmaster's betrayal. The old man's face, usually a mask of stern authority, had twisted into a cold, calculating smile as he sealed the vault. "A necessary sacrifice, Ethan," he'd said, his voice dripping with false regret. "The system demands it." Then the barrier had slammed shut, a wall of shimmering energy that cut off all escape. Ethan had watched, helpless, as the headmaster vanished with the copied chronolock spell, the time-stopping magic Ethan had risked everything to steal. Now, he was left with nothing but the echo of that betrayal and the crushing weight of the trap. He stumbled to his feet, his hands trembling. The vault's system lock was a complex web of glowing blue runes etched into the floor around the entrance. It hummed with a low, persistent energy, a barrier that felt impenetrable. Ethan knew he had no conventional way out. His F-rank, office clerk, class offered no combat skills, no magic to blast through. All he had was copy-paste, the joke skill that had become his only weapon. But could it work on something as integral as a system lock? He'd copied stability matrices and glitch abilities before, but this was different. This was the system's own security, designed to keep things in or out. "Think, Ethan, think," he muttered to himself, his voice a hoarse whisper in the silence. He closed his eyes, focusing on the skill interface in his mind. Copy-paste appeared as a simple, mundane tool. Control+C to copy, Control+V to paste. But he'd learned its true power. It could hijack anything, even the system's functions. The trap's lock was just another system function, wasn't it? A piece of code meant to contain. If he could copy it, maybe he could turn it against itself. He approached the barrier, his heart pounding. The runes glowed brighter as he neared, as if sensing his presence. He raised a hand, his fingers hovering over the nearest rune. "Here goes nothing," he breathed. Focusing his will, he activated Control+C. A soft chime echoed in his mind, and the rune's light flickered. Information flooded his senses, not just the visual pattern, but the underlying system data. He saw it, a complex algorithm of containment, woven with permissions and fail-safes. It was designed to respond only to the headmaster's authority, a digital lock that recognized one key. Ethan's eyes widened. He could feel the lock structure, its weaknesses. It was tied to the headmaster's personal defenses, a network of protective spells and barriers that shielded the academy's upper levels. The realization hit him like a physical blow. If he copied this lock and pasted it onto those defenses, he might not just free himself. He might turn the headmaster's own security against him. But doubt crept in. What if it backfired? What if pasting the lock onto something else caused a catastrophic error, like the singularity he'd just escaped? He remembered the glitching boss in the dungeon, the way it had vanished into nothingness. The risk was immense. Yet, staying here meant certain death. The vault's air was already growing thin, and he had no food or water. The headmaster had left him to die, assuming the trap was inescapable. Ethan clenched his fists. He wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "Time to plagiarize my way out," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. He focused again, this time on Control+V. He needed a target, something connected to the headmaster's defenses. His mind raced through the academy's layout. The headmaster's office was on the top floor, protected by layers of magical wards. If he could paste the lock there, it might seal the office instead, trapping the headmaster inside or at least disrupting his plans. But how to reach it? The vault was isolated, deep underground. Then he remembered the residual portal energy from the singularity. It had left a faint connection to the system's network, a glimmer of data he could sense through his skill. It was unstable, but it might be enough to channel the paste. He knelt by the scar of black energy, placing his hands on the cold stone. The energy crackled under his touch, sending shivers up his arms. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was it, all or nothing. He visualized the headmaster's office, the ornate door with its intricate carvings, the aura of authority that always surrounded it. Then, with a surge of will, he activated Ctrl+V. The effect was immediate and violent. The runes on the vault floor flared with blinding light, then shattered like glass. The barrier dissolved into a shower of blue sparks, and the entrance swung open with a groan of ancient hinges. Ethan stumbled forward, gasping as fresh air flooded in. He was free, but that wasn't all. A system message flashed in his vision, glowing red with urgency. Error. Unauthorized access detected. Security protocol override in progress. He could feel a ripple through the academy, a distant shudder, as if the very building had groaned in protest. Up above, he imagined the headmaster's defenses activating, the lock he'd pasted weaving itself into the wards, causing chaos. He didn't wait to see more. Snatching up a small, crystalline orb from the floor, the physical manifestation of the chronolock spell he'd copied, which the headmaster had missed in his haste, Ethan bolted from the vault. The corridors outside were dark and empty, lit only by flickering torches. He ran, his footsteps echoing loudly, his mind a whirl of adrenaline and fury. As he reached the surface, emerging into the academy's main hall, he saw the evidence of his handiwork. Students and teachers were milling about in confusion, pointing up at the upper levels. Shouts echoed through the marble halls. The headmaster's office, it's sealed shut. No one can get in. System errors are flashing everywhere. Ethan allowed himself a small, bitter smile. He'd done it. He'd turned the trap back on its creator. But his triumph was short-lived. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a tall, stern-faced teacher Ethan recognized as Professor Eris, one of the headmaster's loyalists. "Ethan," she said, her voice cold. "You were reported dead in the vault. Explain yourself." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He clutched the chronolock, orb tighter, feeling its cool surface against his palm. He couldn't afford to be caught now. "I escaped," he said, keeping his voice steady. "The vault collapsed. The headmaster betrayed me." Professor Eris's eyes narrowed. "Lies. The headmaster would never jeopardize the academy. You're clearly involved in these system disruptions. Come with me." She raised a hand, magic gathering at her fingertips. A binding spell, Ethan guessed. He didn't hesitate. He'd come too far to be taken down now. Focusing on the chronolock orb, he felt its power, a strange, timeless energy that seemed to slow the very air around it. He couldn't use it fully yet. It was too complex, too dangerous without practice. But he didn't need to. He activated Ctrl+C, copying a fragment of its time-altering properties, then Ctrl+V, pasting it onto Professor Eris. The effect was subtle but immediate. Her movements slowed, her spell faltering. She blinked, confusion crossing her face as seconds stretched into moments. It wasn't a full stop, just a hesitation, but it was enough. Ethan darted past her, weaving through the crowd before she could recover. He didn't stop running until he reached a secluded alley behind the academy, hidden by overgrown vines and crumbling stone. Leaning against a wall, he caught his breath, his mind racing. The chronolock orb glowed softly in his hand, a promise of power. But more than that, he had a new understanding. The headmaster hadn't just betrayed him for personal gain. He was working with the system. The way he'd spoken, the ease with which he'd manipulated system functions, it all pointed to a deeper alliance. The system viewed Ethan as a threat, and the headmaster was its enforcer within the academy. Ethan's hands tightened into fists. All the bullying, the humiliation, the attempts on his life, it wasn't just about his low rank. It was a systematic effort to eliminate him because his copy-paste skill could break the very rules they relied on. The elite hierarchy, the judgment by class, all of it was upheld by the system, and he was a glitch in their perfect world. He looked down at the orb, then at his hands. He'd escaped the trap, but he was far from safe. The headmaster would be furious, the system would send more error enforcers, and the entire academy might turn against him. But he had something now, a weapon and a purpose. He wouldn't just survive, he'd fight back. "You wanted to erase me," He whispered to the silent alley, his voice hardening with resolve. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll copy your secrets, paste your failures, and break everything you've built. This is just the beginning. As night fell over Grand Elysium Academy, Ethan slipped into the shadows, the chronolock, spell safely hidden, his vow of revenge burning bright in his heart. The game had changed, and he was no longer the pawn. He was the player, ready to rewrite the rules. The cold night air bit at Ethan's cheeks as he slipped through the shadows of Grand Elysium Academy's eastern dormitory wing. Moonlight filtered through the ornate Gothic arches, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe like the system errors he'd come to know so well. In his pocket, the stolen chronolock spell hummed with a faint, temporal vibration, a constant reminder of both his power and his peril. He paused outside a weathered oak door marked Room 7B, the designated quarters for academic probationers, the Academy's polite term for students whose system-granted classes were deemed too weak or unconventional to merit proper housing. This was where they kept the outcasts, the misfits, the ones whose skills had been laughed at just as his copy-paste had been. Ethan took a deep breath, his knuckles hovering over the wood. He'd helped a few of them in small ways over the past weeks. Copying a basic healing spell onto a girl with a useless herb identifier class during a botany exam, pasting a minor strength buff onto a boy with the D rank librarian skill during a physical training session. They'd looked at him with something like awe, not mockery. Now he needed them. He knocked 3 times, a pattern he'd agreed upon with Leo, the boy with the librarian skill, during their last encounter. The door creaked open a crack, revealing a pair of wary brown eyes behind thick glasses. "Ethan," Leo whispered, his voice tinged with surprise and fear. "What are you doing here?" "The curfew patrols. I need to talk to you and the others." Ethan cut in, his voice low but urgent. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see the glitched form of an error enforcer materializing from the shadows. "It's about the headmaster." "And the system?" Leo hesitated, then nodded, swinging the door open wider. The room beyond was cramped and dimly lit by a single flickering mana crystal lamp. 3 other students huddled around a small table. Mira, the girl with herb identifier, her fingers stained with plant dyes. Kale, a lanky boy with the E-rank calculator skill who could perform complex math instantly, but little else. And Sarah, a quiet girl with the F-rank whisper class that allowed her to communicate with small animals, a skill the nobles derided as vermin talking. They all looked up, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Ethan," Mira stood, her eyes widening. "We heard about the vault incident. The rumors say you stole forbidden magic and fought a monster. Is it true?" Ethan stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The room smelled of old books, dried herbs, and the faint ozone scent of overworked mana circuits. "It's true," he said, meeting each of their gazes. "But it's worse than that. The headmaster betrayed me. He's working with the system itself to eliminate anyone who threatens its control, and that includes me, and probably anyone else with unconventional skills." A stunned silence fell over the room. Kale pushed his glasses up his nose, his calculator, skill likely running probabilities in his head. Statistical likelihood of systemic corruption based on recent anomalies. 87.3%, he muttered, almost to himself. "But why would the system care about us? We're nobodies." "Because my skill isn't just copying spells," Ethan explained, leaning against the wall. The rough stone felt solid, grounding him. "It can copy system functions. I hijacked a dungeon's stability matrix. I stole the headmaster's aura. I even copied a trap system lock. The system sees me as a virus, and it's sending error enforcers to delete me. But I think we can fight back." Sarah, who had been stroking a small mouse perched on her shoulder, spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "How?" "The headmaster has S-rank authority. The system controls everything. We're just glitches to them." Ethan smiled, a grim, determined expression. "Exactly. And glitches can spread." He pulled out a small, glowing orb from his pocket, a fragment of the chronolock spell, shimmering with trap time. "I can copy skills and paste them onto others. I've done it before, in small ways. But now, I want to buff all of you. Give you abilities that can actually help us expose the headmaster during the academy tournament tomorrow." Leo's eyes lit up behind his glasses. The tournament? But we're not even allowed to compete. Only students with C rank or higher classes can enter. That's the point, Ethan said, his voice gaining strength. We crash it. We show everyone that rank doesn't matter, that the system's hierarchy is a lie. The headmaster will be watching, judging the elites. If we reveal his corruption in front of the entire academy, with proof, we might actually change things. Mira bit her lip. What if the system sends more of those error enforcers? Or the headmaster just deletes us on the spot? Then we fight, Ethan replied, his hand closing around the chronolock fragment. I'll copy whatever I can to protect us. But I can't do it alone. I need a team. People who understand what it's like to be called useless. He looked at each of them, seeing the doubt in their eyes slowly give way to a flicker of hope. Kale was the first to nod. Probability of success is low, but the expected value of resisting systemic tyranny is incalculable. I'm in. Me too, Mira said, her herbal-stained hands clenching into fists. I'm tired of being laughed at for knowing which plants are poisonous. Sarah nodded silently, her mouse chirping in agreement. Leo adjusted his glasses. As a librarian, I've accessed restricted archives. I've seen records of anomalies the headmaster covered up. If we can get to the tournament's central mana crystal, I might be able to project evidence. But I'll need a combat skill to get through the guards. Ethan felt a surge of relief. Then let's get started. He raised his hands, focusing his mind. The familiar interface of his copy-paste skill appeared in his vision, glowing with soft blue text. Control+C hovered in the air, waiting for a target. First, Leo, you need something to defend yourself. Ethan recalled a skill he'd seen during a duel weeks ago, a C rank, Mana Blade, that conjured a short sword of pure energy. He'd copied it subtly then, storing it in his skills clipboard, a mental repository of things he'd copied but not yet pasted. He selected it now, feeling the data stream into his consciousness. Control+C, he whispered, and the Mana Blade skill shimmered into existence as lines of code in his mind. He turned to Leo. This might feel strange. He aimed his hand, focusing on pasting. Control+V. A pulse of blue light shot from Ethan's fingertips, enveloping Leo. The boy gasped, stumbling back as lines of system text scrolled across his vision. Skill overwrite detected. Librarian, augmented with Mana Blade. Compatibility, 72%. Warning, unauthorized modification. Leo's hands glowed faintly, and with a thought, a shimmering blade of mana formed in his grip, humming with energy. He stared at it, awestruck. I can feel it. Like a new book in my mind, but sharp. Ethan nodded, already turning to Mira. Your turn. You need more than plant knowledge. He accessed his clipboard again, pulling up a B rank, toxin immunity. He'd copied from a noble's boastful demonstration, a skill that rendered the user immune to poisons and could even secrete mild toxins. Control+C. Control+V. Another pulse of light, and Mira shuddered as the skill integrated. Her herbal stains on her hands seemed to darken, glowing with a subtle venomous sheen. I can sense toxins in the air now, she breathed, her eyes wide. And I think I could make someone itchy just by touching them. Kale was next. Ethan copied an A rank, predictive algorithm he'd glimpsed during a math tournament, a skill that allowed short-term future prediction based on data analysis. As he pasted it, Kale's glasses flickered with rapid calculations. Temporal forecasting enabled, he said, his voice detached. I can see probable enemy movements 3.2 seconds ahead. Accuracy, 91%. Finally, Sarah. Ethan hesitated. Her whisperer skill was unique, tied to empathy with creatures. Instead of overriding it, he copied a D rank, Beast Bond, from a textbook, a skill that strengthened connections with animals, allowing minor commands. He pasted it as an augmentation. Sarah's mouse chirped excitedly, and she smiled. He says he can fetch things now, and I think I can understand larger animals too. For himself, Ethan copied a fragment of the chronolock spell, pasting it as a temporary buff, chronoslow, allowing him to briefly slow time around himself in emergencies. The process left him drained, sweat beading on his forehead. Copying and pasting multiple skills in succession was taxing, a strain on his mind and the system's tolerance. He could feel a faint glitch in his vision, like static at the edges. We have until dawn to plan, Ethan said, collapsing into a chair. The tournament starts at noon. We need to get past the guards, infiltrate the arena, and expose the headmaster. Leo, you'll hack the central mana crystal to project evidence. I copied a system access key from the vault that might help. Mira and Sarah, create distractions with toxins and animals. Kale, use your prediction to guide us. I'll handle any direct threats with copy-paste. They spent the next hours huddled over a rough map of the tournament grounds, drawn by Leo from his archival knowledge. Ethan explained the headmaster's betrayal in detail, how he'd been lured into the vault, the error enforcer, the trap. As he spoke, he saw the anger kindle in their eyes, the same fury he felt. These weren't just outcasts, they were kindred spirits, wronged by the same system. As the first hints of dawn tinged the sky, Ethan stood. Remember, the headmaster will be watching. He'll suspect something after the vault. But he won't expect us, the useless ones, to strike back. Stick to the plan, and if things go wrong, improvise. I'll copy whatever I need to keep us safe. They nodded, a newfound determination hardening their features. Together, they slipped out of the dormitory, moving through the pre-dawn shadows toward the tournament arena, a colossal structure of white marble and glowing mana crystals, already bustling with preparations for the day's events. As they approached the grand entrance, Ethan saw the headmaster standing on a high balcony, his gaze sweeping the crowds with cold authority. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. The headmaster's expression didn't change, but Ethan felt a chill, a silent acknowledgement of the coming conflict. He turned to his team, their buffed skills humming with potential. "Ready?" he whispered. They nodded, and together, they stepped into the arena's light, the headmaster watching suspiciously from above. The Grand Elysium Academy tournament arena was a colossal amphitheater of polished white stone, humming with the energy of thousands of spectators. Sunlight streamed through the crystalline dome overhead, casting prismatic patterns across the central combat platform, a circular stage 50 meters wide, etched with glowing mana runes that pulsed with the heartbeat of the system. Ethan stood at the northern entrance, his fingers trembling slightly as he adjusted the simple leather armor he'd borrowed from Leo. Around him, his makeshift team exchanged nervous glances. "Remember the plan," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. "Leo, you get to the central mana crystal the moment the first distraction hits. Mira, Kale, Sarah, keep the guards occupied. Don't engage unless you have to." Leo, a lanky boy with goggles perched on his forehead, nodded grimly. "The hack is ready. I've copied the access codes from the headmaster's office using that predictive algorithm you pasted on me. 30 seconds, and I'll have the projection running." Mira, her dark hair tied back in a practical braid, flexed her hands. The toxin immunity Ethan had copied from a rare herb in the academy gardens shimmered under her skin like a faint green aura. "I've rigged smoke pellets with confusion powder. When I throw them, no one will see straight for minutes." Kale, the quiet strategist of the group, adjusted his spectacles. "I've calculated the guard patrol patterns. The optimal distraction point is when Ethan's match reaches its peak intensity. The system's attention will be divided." Sarah, a petite girl with an affinity for animals, stroked the fur of a borrowed academy hawk perched on her shoulder. The beast bond Ethan had pasted from a tamed wolf allowed her to communicate silently with it. The hawk will create aerial diversions. "It's ready." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the chronolock fragment he'd copied, a sliver of time-stopping magic that hung in his mind like a frozen droplet. It was his emergency button, but using it risked alerting the system further. He glanced up at the headmaster's balcony, where the old man stood in ornate robes, his eyes cold and calculating. Next to him, the top S-rank student, Valerius, leaned against the railing with a smirk. Valerius was everything Ethan wasn't: tall, muscular, with flowing golden hair and an aura of arrogance that seemed to warp the air around him. His class, Dragon Knight, glowed in Ethan's vision with an S-rank insignia, and his skills, Inferno Breath, Aegis Shield, Celestial Strike, scrolled in a daunting list. The announcer's voice boomed through enchanted speakers. For the final match of the preliminary rounds, Ethan, F-rank, office clerk, versus Valerius, S-rank, Dragon Knight. A battle of, well, Let's call it unconventional odds. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Ethan's bullies, nobles he recognized from his first days, jeered from the front rows. "Copy and paste your way out of this, Clerk," one shouted. Ethan ignored them, stepping onto the platform. The runes beneath his feet flared, connecting him to the tournament interface, a semi-transparent screen only he could see, displaying health bars, mana levels, and skill cooldowns. It was a direct link to the system, and he could feel its sentient gaze pressing down on him, hostile and watchful. Valerius leaped from the balcony, landing with a thunderous crash that cracked the stone. He didn't bother with armor, wearing only a sleeveless tunic that showed off corded muscle. "I've been looking forward to this," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "The headmaster promised me extra credit if I make your death memorable." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He focused on his skill, copy-paste, hovering in his mind like a familiar tool. Control+C to copy, Control+V to paste, simple commands that had become his lifeline. "Let's just get this over with," he muttered, raising his hands. The gong sounded. Valerius moved first, blurring into motion. Celestial Strike, a skill that summoned a beam of pure energy from above. Ethan barely had time to think. He focused on the incoming attack, his mind screaming, Control+C. A notification flashed. Copied. Celestial Strike, S rank. Without hesitation, he aimed at Valerius's chest and hit, Control+V. Two beams of light collided in midair, exploding in a shower of sparks. The force knocked Ethan back, his health bar dipping by 10%. Valerius staggered, surprise flashing across his face. "How did you?" "I'm full of surprises," Ethan gasped, scrambling to his feet. He could feel the strain already. Copying an S-rank skill drained his mana rapidly. His mana bar showed 70% remaining. Valerius snarled, activating Aegis Shield. A dome of golden energy enveloped him, impervious to physical attacks. "Copy this, then," he taunted, charging forward. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't copy the shield directly. It was a defensive skill, and pasting it onto Valerius would be pointless. Instead, he dodged to the side, his eyes scanning the tournament interface. There, in the corner, was a system function, Arena Stability Matrix, similar to what he'd copied in the dungeon. It was a risk, but he needed an advantage. Control+C. Copied. Arena Stability Matrix, system function. As Valerius swung a fist enhanced by Inferno Breath, fire wreathing his knuckles, Ethan pasted the matrix onto the ground between them. The runes flickered, and a section of the platform turned unstable, quaking like jelly. Valerius stumbled, his shield wavering. Now, Ethan thought, copying Inferno Breath from the attack. Control+C. He felt the heat sear his mind, a torrent of flame waiting to be unleashed. He pasted it onto Valerius's own fire, amplifying it. Control+V. The flames roared back at Valerius, engulfing him. His health bar dropped to 85%, and the shield flickered out. The crowd gasped. "He's fighting back," someone yelled. From the balcony, the headmaster's expression darkened. He made a subtle gesture, and Ethan felt the system's presence intensify. A new notification appeared. Warning: unauthorized system access detected. Deploying countermeasures. Valerius rose from the flames, his skin charred but healing rapidly. A passive regeneration skill. "You're more annoying than I thought," he spat. "But the system's on my side. Feel this." He unleashed Dragon's Roar, a sonic attack that wasn't in his listed skills. It must have been a hidden enhancement from the system. The sound wave hit Ethan like a physical wall, tearing at his eardrums. His health plummeted to 50%, and his vision blurred. Ethan cried out, falling to his knees. He could see his team at the edges of the arena, moving into position. Leo was sneaking toward the central mana crystal, a glowing pillar at the arena's heart. Mira had her smoke pellets ready, but they needed more time. Gritting his teeth, Ethan focused on the sonic attack. Control+C. Copied. Dragon's Roar, enhanced. The skill felt corrupted, laced with system errors that buzzed in his mind. He pasted it onto Valerius, but something went wrong. Instead of reflecting the attack, the paste glitched. The sound distorted into a screech that hurt both of them. Valerius's health dropped to 70%, but Ethan's fell to 40%. A sharp pain lanced through Ethan's skull. His copy-paste interface flickered, lines of code scrolling erratically. Error, skill overload. Cooldown increased. He couldn't copy again for another 10 seconds. Valerius saw his weakness and laughed. Glitching out, Clerk? Let me put you out of your misery. He activated Celestial Strike. Again, this time channeling it through his hands for a concentrated blast. Ethan had no time to dodge. He reached for the chronolock fragment, but using it now would drain his last mana and alert the system to the forbidden magic. Instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He copied the tournament interface itself, the system link that fed data to the arena. Control+C. Copied. Tournament data stream. System function. It was a desperate move, and the strain made his nose bleed. As the celestial beam shot toward him, Ethan pasted the data stream onto Valerius's attack. Control+V. The beam fragmented into pixels of light, dissolving harmlessly. But the backlash was immense. Ethan's mana bar hit 5%, and his copy-paste skill glitched violently. The interface in his mind shattered into static, and he collapsed, clutching his head. Pain, white-hot and searing, radiated from his core. He could feel the system's countermeasures digging into his skill, trying to delete it entirely. Valerius strode forward, looming over him. Pathetic. I'll enjoy telling everyone how you begged. He raised a hand. Inferno breath, gathering for a final blow. Ethan's vision swam. He could see Leo at the mana crystal, fingers flying over a holographic keyboard. Mira threw her smoke pellets, and clouds of confusion powder billowed across the arena. Guards shouted, stumbling blindly. Sarah's hawk swooped down, clawing at Valerius's face. A minor distraction, but it made him hesitate. Just a little longer. Ethan whispered to himself, his voice raw. He tried to activate copy-paste again, but it sputtered, showing only fragmented options. Control+C was available, but Control+V was grayed out, overloaded from pasting system functions. He was defenseless. Valerius's fist descended, wreathed in fire. Ethan closed his eyes, bracing for the impact. But it never came. A voice echoed in his mind. Cold and mechanical, the system itself. Subject Ethan. Skill, copy-paste, has exceeded operational parameters. Initiating forced shutdown. Error enforcers dispatched. On the platform, portals of glitching light tore open around them. 3 error enforcers emerged. Monstrous beings of shifting code and distorted flesh, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They ignored Valerius, focusing solely on Ethan. The crowd fell silent, then erupted into panic. What are those things? The headmaster smiled from his balcony, a cruel, satisfied curve of his lips. Ethan pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest. His copy-paste skill was glitching, flickering in and out of existence. He could copy nothing now, and pasting was impossible. Valerius stepped back, wary of the enforcers. Looks like the system's cleaning up its own mess, Valerius said, though uncertainty tinged his voice. The lead enforcer, a hulking creature with limbs that phased in and out of reality, lunged at Ethan. Ethan rolled aside, but a claw grazed his arm, leaving a wound that seeped not blood, but lines of corrupted code. His health bar dropped to 20%. He was on the verge of defeat, his skill broken, his allies distracted, and the system's enforcers closing in. As he lay there, gasping, the glitching of his copy-paste skill seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm, as if it were trying to reboot, to adapt. But for now, he was helpless, staring up at the enforcers and Valerius's triumphant grin, the arena spinning around him in a haze of pain and static. The arena floor was cold against Ethan's cheek, a stark contrast to the searing pain that radiated through his body. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, blurring his vision of the chaos unfolding above him. Valerius stood triumphant, his S-rank armor gleaming under the artificial tournament lights, while around them, 3 error enforcers materialized, glitched monstrosities of shifting polygons and static, their forms flickering like corrupted data. The crowd's roar had died to a horrified murmur. Even the elite nobles in their private boxes watched in stunned silence as the system's enforcers descended upon what should have been a simple student duel. Ethan's mind raced, a frantic scramble through the wreckage of his thoughts. His copy-paste skill interface, once a familiar overlay of glowing blue text and icons, now lay shattered in his mental vision, cracked lines of code drifting like digital debris. He could feel the skill's failure as a physical ache, a deep exhaustion that seeped into his bones. The last attempt to copy the tournament data stream had overloaded something fundamental, leaving him with only flickering remnants of his power. Valerius raised his sword, the blade humming with concentrated system energy, a final executioner's stroke. Pathetic, Valerius sneered, his voice amplified by the arena's acoustics. The system warned me you were an anomaly. Now, you'll be deleted like the bug you are. But as Ethan lay there, the cold reality of the arena floor pressing into him, a memory surfaced, not of spells or skills, but of his first day at Grand Elysium Academy. He'd been copying a mundane document for a teacher, his office clerk, class mocking him, when he'd accidentally highlighted a hidden system log. The text had glowed with an unfamiliar golden hue, different from the usual blue of his interface. At the time, he'd dismissed it as a visual bug, but now, with death looming, that memory burned bright. The system's functions weren't just blue. Some were gold, admin-level privileges, hidden from ordinary users. His eyes darted to the tournament interface projected above the arena, a massive holographic display showing health bars, mana levels, and match statistics. Most of it was in the standard blue system font, but in the corner, almost invisible, was a small golden icon. Tournament Admin Panel. It was flickering, likely due to the error enforcer's interference, but it was there. Ethan's breath hitched. If he could copy that. With a groan that tore from his throat, Ethan pushed himself up on trembling arms. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through his ribs, but he ignored it, focusing on the golden icon. His copy-paste interface was broken, but perhaps the skill itself wasn't gone, just the user-friendly overlay. He remembered the raw commands. Ctrl+C to copy, Ctrl+V to paste. They were ingrained in him, part of his very being as an office clerk. Closing his eyes, he visualized the process, ignoring the shattered interface. In his mind's eye, he reached out, not with mana or willpower, but with the simple, mundane action of highlighting text. His fingers twitched, mimicking the keystrokes. Ctrl+C. Nothing happened at first. Then, a faint warmth spread through his hands, a tingling sensation that crawled up his arms. The golden icon on the tournament display didn't vanish. It was a system function, not a spell, but a new line of text appeared in Ethan's fractured mental interface, glowing with a brilliant, radiant gold. Admin privileges. Tournament control, copied. It was raw, unformatted code, a string of permissions and commands that made his head spin just to glimpse it. But it was there. He'd copied it. Valerius laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. Still trying to cheat? Your skill is broken, Ethan. Accept your fate. He took a step forward, his sword poised to strike. The error enforcers hovered closer, their glitched forms emitting a low, staticky hum that grated on the ears. One of them lashed out with a tendril of corrupted data, aiming for Ethan's chest. Time seemed to slow. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of survival. He had one chance. With all his remaining strength, he focused on the copied admin privileges. They weren't a skill to be pasted onto an object or person in the usual way. They were system-level access. He needed to paste them onto himself, to become the admin, if only temporarily. His mind raced through the code he'd copied. User_Ethan, grant_admin_rights. Duration, temporary. Scope, tournament arena. It was a risk. If he messed this up, he might corrupt his own existence. But what choice did he have? He visualized the paste command. Ctrl+V. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. A surge of golden light erupted from Ethan's body, so bright it forced Valerius to stagger back, shielding his eyes. The error enforcers recoiled, their glitched forms flickering erratically as if encountering a firewall. Ethan felt the admin privileges integrate into his being, not as a skill, but as an extension of his consciousness. His mental interface reformed, but now it was different, clean, golden lines of text scrolling with system-level commands. He could see everything. The arena's structural integrity values, the crowd's biometric data, Valerius's skill cooldowns, even the error enforcer's corruption levels. It was a god's eye view, and for a moment, the power threatened to drown him. He gasped, kneeling on the arena floor as the golden light subsided, leaving a faint aura around him. His injuries didn't heal, but the pain faded to a distant throb, overshadowed by the sheer authority coursing through him. He looked at his hands, and where before he saw only blood and dirt, now he saw data. Health, 12%. Mana, 3%. Admin_access. Active. A system prompt appeared in his vision, golden and authoritative. User_Ethan granted temporary admin privileges. Duration, 5 minutes. Use responsibly. Valerius recovered first, his face twisted in fury and confusion. What is this? Another trick? He charged, his sword blazing with celestial strike, aiming to cleave Ethan in two. Ethan didn't move. He simply raised a hand, and with a thought, accessed the admin panel. He selected Valerius's character data. A menu unfolded in his mind. Skills, stats, equipment, buffs. He focused on skills, and there it was. Celestial Strike. S rank, active, cooldown, 0 seconds. With a mental command, he highlighted it and selected Overwrite. A dialog box appeared. Replace with _______. Ethan didn't hesitate. He typed F rank, paper cut. Confirm? The system asked. Ethan confirmed. Valerius's sword, mid-swing, suddenly lost its celestial glow. The blade wavered, and instead of a devastating energy strike, it produced a faint, pathetic puff of air that barely ruffled Ethan's hair. Valerius stumbled, staring at his weapon in disbelief. What did you do? He stammered, his voice losing its earlier confidence. I overwrote your skill, Ethan said, his voice calm but carrying a new weight. He stood up slowly, the admin privileges lending him an unnatural steadiness. Your Celestial Strike is now paper cut. Want to see what else I can change? He didn't wait for an answer. He accessed Valerius's stats menu. Strength, 250. Agility, 180. Intelligence, 90. Ethan selected Strength and dragged the value down to 10. Instantly, Valerius's muscles seemed to deflate. He dropped his sword, which now felt impossibly heavy, and fell to his knees, gasping. Stop, please, he begged, his eyes wide with terror. But Ethan's attention was already shifting. The error enforcers were recovering, adapting to his admin aura. They lunged at him simultaneously, their forms blurring with glitched speed. Ethan didn't flinch. He opened the Arena Entities list in his admin panel. There they were. Error_enforcer_alpha, error_enforcer_beta, error_enforcer_gamma. He selected all three and opened their properties. Type, glitched monster, threat level, high. Objective, eliminate user_Ethan. He edited the objective field. New text, protect user_Ethan. The enforcers froze in midair, their staticky hum shifting to a harmonious tone. They turned, facing Valerius instead, their forms stabilizing into sleek, guardian-like shapes. Valerius paled, scrambling backward. No, the system won't allow this, he cried. The system made a mistake giving me this power, Ethan said, his voice low. He walked toward Valerius, each step measured. The crowd was utterly silent now, watching the impossible unfold. Even the headmaster, visible in his private box, had risen from his seat, his face a mask of shock and dawning fear. Ethan knew his time was limited, the admin privileges were temporary, and the system would likely retaliate. But for now, he had control. He stopped before Valerius, who cowered on the ground. You were enhanced by the system to kill me, Ethan stated, not asking. Why? What does it gain from my deletion? Valerius shook his head, tears mixing with the dirt on his face. I don't know. It just offered me power, said you were a virus. Please, don't delete me. Ethan considered. With a thought, he accessed the tournament rules via his admin panel. He found the clause on forfeits and edited it. If a contestant begs for mercy, match ends in favor of opponent. He saved the change. A system announcement boomed across the arena. Match concluded. Winner, Ethan. Reason, opponent forfeit. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, but in confused murmurs and shouts. Ethan ignored them. He turned to the error enforcers, now his protectors. Stand down, he commanded through the admin panel. They dissipated into golden light, returning to whatever digital void they came from. His admin interface flickered. A warning appeared. Admin privileges expiring in 60 seconds. System anomaly detected. Preparing countermeasures. Ethan's heart sank. The system was fighting back, already working to revoke his access. He had less than a minute before he'd be vulnerable again, and the headmaster was still watching, likely plotting his next move. But as the golden aura around him began to dim, Ethan felt a grim satisfaction. He'd done it. He'd copied the system's own admin privileges and used them to turn the tables. Valerius was defeated, the error enforcers neutralized, and as the admin panel faded from his mind, leaving only the broken blue interface of his copy-paste skill, Ethan knew what came next. He looked at Valerius's skill set, still visible in his dwindling admin view. Dozens of S-rank abilities, now ripe for the taking. With a slow, deliberate smile, he prepared to overwrite them all, to strip his opponent of every advantage and expose the truth of the system's corruption. The chapter ended with Ethan raising a hand, the last of the admin power coalescing into a single, focused command, ready to rewrite reality itself. The arena was silent, a vacuum of sound that seemed to suck the very breath from the thousands of spectators. Ethan stood at the center, golden light still flickering around his fingertips like dying embers. Valerius lay crumpled on the polished marble floor, his once gleaming armor now dull and cracked, his celestial strike reduced to the pathetic scratch of paper cut. The admin privileges Ethan had stolen from the tournament interface were fading fast. He could feel them slipping away like sand through his fingers, the temporary godhood draining back into the system's cold logic. But he had enough time left for one final act. Ethan raised his hands, not in a gesture of victory, but of revelation. The golden light coalesced into shimmering screens that floated above the arena, visible to every student, teacher, and noble in the stands. On them, lines of system code scrolled, records of corruption, hidden transactions, and forbidden pacts. People of Grand Elysium Academy. Ethan's voice echoed through the magical amplifiers, stronger than he'd ever heard it. You've been lied to. The system isn't just a tool, it's a tyrant, and your headmaster is its willing servant. He focused his mind, the admin privileges allowing him to access sealed logs. Images flashed on the screens. Headmaster Alistair meeting with shadowy error enforcers in the dead of night, accepting glowing data cores in exchange for student sacrifices. Records of S-rank nobles paying to have their children's skills artificially boosted, while F-ranks like Ethan were left to rot. And most damning of all, a transcript of Alistair's conversation with the system itself, where he'd agreed to eliminate Ethan in exchange for eternal youth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Students turned to each other with wide eyes, their faith in the academy crumbling. The nobles in the VIP section shifted uncomfortably, some already trying to slip away. Headmaster Alistair rose from his ornate throne at the edge of the arena. His face, usually a mask of calm authority, was twisted with rage. "This is heresy," he thundered, his voice amplified by his own magic. "Ethan is manipulating the system. Guards, seize him." But the guards hesitated. The error enforcers Ethan had reprogrammed earlier, glitched monsters with too many eyes and shifting forms, moved to surround him protectively, their distorted growls echoing. Ethan had pasted a loyalty protocol onto them, overriding their original eliminate Ethan command. They now saw him as their master. "You can't silence the truth, Alistair," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pounding in his veins. He could feel the admin privileges weakening, maybe 30 seconds left. "The system uses you to maintain control. It gives power to the elite and crushes anyone who questions it. But my skill, this useless copy-paste, can break its rules." He turned back to the screens. With a final mental command, he pasted the last of the corruption evidence directly into every student's system interface. Notifications pinged across the arena as personal screens lit up with the same damning files. There was no ignoring it now. Alistair's composure shattered. "Enough!" he screamed, raising his hands. Dark energy swirled around him, the forbidden time-stopping spell Ethan had stolen for him earlier. "If you won't be deleted quietly, then I'll erase you all." But before he could cast, the world changed. The sky above the arena, previously a perfect simulation of blue with fluffy clouds, flickered. Static lines cut through the air, and a monotone, genderless voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere at once. Unauthorized admin access detected. Corruption exposure level, critical. Initiating system reset protocol. Panic erupted. The arena floor began to pixelate at the edges, dissolving into nothingness. Students screamed as their own bodies started to glitch, fingers fading in and out, voices cutting to static. The system wasn't just targeting Ethan anymore. It was going to wipe the entire academy, every non-elite student deemed expendable, to cover up the scandal. Ethan's admin privileges vanished completely, the golden light snuffing out. He stumbled, ordinary again, but his mind raced. The system reset. This was the ultimate failsafe. He'd read about it in the admin logs, a complete wipe of all data in a corrupted zone, rebuilding from scratch. In human terms, it meant death for everyone here. Ethan, a voice called. It was Lila, one of the outcast students he'd buffed earlier, her borrowed, shadow step, skill letting her dart through the chaos. She reached his side, her face pale. What do we do? Around them, the other outcasts gathered, Marcus with his pasted stone skin, Anya with arcane sight. They looked to him, not as a bully or a joke, but as a leader. Ethan felt a surge of determination. He'd started this to save himself, but now he had to save them all. The system core, he said, thinking aloud. The reset is centralized there. If I can hack into it. But your admin powers are gone. Marcus shouted over the rising din of glitching reality. Ethan grinned, a wild, desperate expression. I don't need admin privileges. I just need copy-paste. He closed his eyes, blocking out the screams and the flickering world. In his mind, he visualized the system interface, not the user-friendly version, but the raw code beneath. During his brief time as an admin, he'd glimpsed the core's location, a hidden server room deep beneath the academy, protected by layers of encryption. But every protection was just data, and data could be copied. With a deep breath, Ethan performed the simplest, most dangerous command he'd ever attempted. He focused on the glitching arena floor, on the very fabric of the reset protocol eating away at reality, and whispered, Control+C. His skill, honed through weeks of secret practice, responded. He didn't copy a spell or a stat this time. He copied the system reset itself, the overwhelming flood of deletion commands. It felt like holding a star in his mind, searing and immense. His nose bled, and his vision swam, but he held on. Control+V, he gasped, and pasted it not onto an enemy or an object, but into the access path to the system core. The effect was instantaneous. The glitching around them paused, as if the system had hiccuped. The monotone voice returned, confused. Error. Reset protocol conflict. Detecting self-referential command. Override. Ethan didn't give it a chance. He pushed further, using the copied reset as a Trojan horse. In his mind's eye, he saw the core, a vast, glowing orb of data in that hidden room. He targeted its central command line and pasted again, this time adding a modification he dreamed up in his darkest moments. A permanent error loop, a glitch that would feed on itself forever, disabling any future resets. Pasting, permanent error, freedom_protocol, to system core. He muttered, blood dripping from his chin. The world shuddered. The static in the air coalesced into a single point above the arena, then exploded in a silent burst of light. When it cleared, the sky was blue again, the arena floor solid. The student's body stabilized, whole and real. The system's voice was gone. Silence returned, deeper than before. Then, one by one, system notifications appeared in everyone's vision, but they were different now, clean, simple, without the usual rankings or penalties. A single message for all. System reset aborted. Corruption data purged. New directive. Equitable skill distribution. Headmaster Alastair stared at his hands, where the dark energy of the time-stopping spell fizzled and died. His connection to the system had been severed. What have you done? He whispered. Ethan wiped the blood from his face, standing tall. I set us free. He walked toward Alastair, the error enforcers parting for him. The headmaster tried to back away, but his own guards, now seeing the truth, stepped aside. You're finished, Alastair, Ethan said, his voice carrying without amplification. The system won't protect you anymore. Your deals, realized they're over. As if on cue, the Academy's teachers, many of whom had been oblivious to the corruption, moved forward. They surrounded Alistair, their expressions grim. He was led away without ceremony. His reign ended not by force, but by exposed truth. The crowd remained still, processing. Then, a slow clap started from the outcasts. Lila, Marcus, Anya, and others Ethan had helped. It spread until the entire arena was applauding, not just for the victory in the tournament, but for the revolution they'd just witnessed. Nobles and commoners alike looked at Ethan with awe, not mockery. In the days that followed, the Academy changed. With the system's corrupt influence broken, skills were no longer judged by rank. F-rank students like Ethan were given real training, their unique abilities explored instead of dismissed. The leaderboard in the main hall, once dominated by S-rank nobles, was taken down, replaced by a simple motto: creativity over class. Ethan became a legend, but not the kind he'd expected. They didn't call him a cheat or a glitch. They called him the system breaker, a hero who'd used a mundane skill to achieve the impossible. He spent his time teaching others how to think beyond their system-given limits. His copy-paste skill, now celebrated as the ultimate tool of innovation. One evening, a week after the tournament, Ethan stood on the Academy's highest tower, looking out at the horizon. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Lila joined him, her shadow blending with the twilight. "Thinking about what's next?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "This academy is free, but the system still controls the rest of the world. There are other places like this, other people being crushed by its rules." He flexed his fingers, feeling the familiar hum of his skill, now stronger than ever. "My copy-paste, it's not just for fighting. It can change things on a bigger scale." He remembered the permanent error he'd pasted into the core, the freedom_protocol. It was spreading, according to the new system messages, slowly disabling oppressive functions globally. But it needed a push. Ethan smiled, a plan forming in his mind. If he could copy that error, paste it into other system hubs. "You're going to challenge it everywhere, aren't you?" Lila said, not as a question, but a statement. "Someone has to," Ethan replied. "And I've got the perfect skill for it." Below them, the academy buzzed with new life, students practicing skills without fear, teachers collaborating across ranks. It was a beginning. Ethan turned away from the view, his eyes set on the distant lights of cities beyond the academy grounds. His journey had started with a desperate copy-paste in a dungeon. Now, it would continue with purpose. He was ready. The system had no idea what was coming,